Hello and welcome to Cinematronix Summer Review Part 2 with my my regular...
Part two. Are we
or
sure
Part
about
3.
that?
Is it 3 or 4?
No, this is volume 4, part 1.
Okay. Well, as you can hear, the dulcet tones of Mr. David Bond.
Good evening, folks. I thought I was safe to take a drink of water then, but I wasn't. Never mind. Excellent timing. We're even more professional when it's the Cinematronix.
Oh, indeed.
Cinematronix man. Yeah, this is the fourth year we've done this, and last year we split it into two. And this year I wasn't sure because I thought, oh, it started a bit later. But we've just talked about films tonight. We've got like a record number to cover again. So yeah, we've got to do this in two parts.
Yeah, I mean, summer. I mean, I don't know what's classed as summer anymore because the blockbuster films tend to sort of come out throughout the year now. So, what's classed
Well,
as summer?
we had a genuine conversation, albeit a very short one, because I think we were both nope straight away. But we had a genuine conversation just before we hit record on Glass, because Glass is vaguely a superhero film, but it was January, and you think, well, how far do you go? In a minute, we'll be going right back to the end of the last summer review. So we left that one, but even now we're going to start with a film in February, because it's undoubtedly the sort of film that kind of belongs in the summer. And once you've done that, you start looking at everything that follows and thinking, well, we might as well cover that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think our listeners generally want to kind of hear what we think about other films as well, the current releases.
Yeah. As usual, there's one or two we haven't all seen. We haven't both seen. But I think everything we're going to cover tonight, with one exception, which will just be a short bit at the start, is stuff we've both seen. So there's not an awful lot of chat at the start of the show. Going back a couple of years ago when we took this a lot less seriously, but now I feel like, no, that's the summer film, I better watch that, because end up covering everything.
Yeah, so you've seen Godzilla, right, haven't you? And that's the film that I haven't
I
yet
saw,
seen.
I saw, yeah, I saw Godzilla last night. Now we're recording this on the 2nd of June, which is a Sunday night. It'll be out the following weekend. Godzilla only came out, well, I think it came out midweek, but if you think about picking a weekend to go and see stuff, it's only just out. I saw Godzilla yesterday, tea time. I think before I start, did you see the 19th? No, let's start that again. Did you see the 2014 one, Gareth Edwards one?
Yes, yeah, I saw it
Right.
way back in the day. It was on TV last night, so I saw like little bits of it. I was like, oh, actually, I might want to rewatch that at some
Yeah.
point. But
If you only watch bits of it, the chances of you actually seeing Godzilla are a bit like finding a needle in a
well,
haystack, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those cases where, well, my thoughts on it was it's a good concept, but I think it was just like the wrong choice of director and vision for it, because it was kind of it was like teasing Godzilla to this big thing towards the end. I also think probably the casting of what's his name, Kick-Ass.
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
That's the one. I was going to say
I'd almost
Alan
forgot
Taylor
the film.
Johnson.
I couldn't remember he was in it. The only thing I remember is Bryan Cranston was in it.
Yeah.
It was great, and then he died about half hour in, and it was
Yeah.
like, oh fuck, right?
But it's meant to be that kind of like shock value theory, isn't it? Of like thinking, oh shit,
It's
where do we
funny.
go from here?
My memory of the 2014 Godzilla film is almost certainly erroneous, because I can't remember the last film I saw outside of The Hateful Eight that had an intermission. But I remember that 2014 film having an intermission, which I'm pretty sure it didn't. I think it's just about halfway through we finally saw Godzilla for a couple of minutes, and then it felt like it went to an intermission, and then we had like a second half that built up to it again.
Then we saw his foot, and then like,
I know. Charlie has been tweeting a lot over it in the last couple of days, because he's a big fan of the Godzilla series and the original, is it Japanese? I'm showing my complete lack of knowledge here,
yeah,
but
it will be, yeah.
Japanese films and so on. And he tweeted the other day that people are complaining there wasn't enough Godzilla in the first one, the 2014 one, so the first of this series. And he pointed out that there was 9 minutes of Godzilla in it, and the 1954 Godzilla film had 8 minutes. Then someone replied and said, yeah, but that film was about 93 minutes, and that one is 128. So actually, pound for pound, it's a bit less. I think what Charlie keeps trying to say is Godzilla films generally don't have an awful lot of Godzilla in them. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Although it did come out a little bit like, have any of you seen a Godzilla film sort of thing? And I can understand that, because it must be frustrating when people are complaining about things that are completely anti the format of these things. But there was no doubt, as an audience that doesn't know much in the way, I mean, we'd probably seen a 1980s cartoon and, the Roland Emmerich film, and that was about it. The 2014 film was incredibly dull. Really, really dull. This one's got an awful lot more action in it. I found it funny in places inadvertently, because Carl Chandler's the main character in it, and I swear for the first 10 minutes he's doing a Clint Eastwood impression. It's like the man with no name. He's doing this husky fucking smoky whisper. But then suddenly about 10 minutes in he starts talking normally. It's got a whiff of focus group to it, because it's got that young girl from Stranger Things in it. And honestly, they might as well have called her Leslie Crusher, because she was totally like Wesley Crusher in the early TNG series, the Next Generation Star Trek.
When everyone's told to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, but it's more that like a kid is saving the day, and I find that obnoxious. I don't really like it. But I have to say that just on action alone, it was a lot better. It had a decent cast. Funny thing is, it feels a long time since the 2014 film, because that famous Irish actor, as we discussed during the Batman series, Ken O. Watanabe, reprised the same role, and I don't remember him. That's a joke. You need to go back and listen to our Dark Knight episodes or the Batman Begins more specifically, to get the reference that we're making there. But Ken Watanabe is playing the same character, and I don't even remember the 2014 film except crushing disappointment. In fact, I couldn't remember it, because it was Carl Chandler and Vera Farmiga, all kind of very cliched in that they'd lost a child, and she buried herself in work and he buried himself in alcohol. And now it's a man desperately trying to protect his daughter, and it's always fathers and daughters. You never get a Hollywood film where a father gives a shit about his son. Do you know what I mean? And some of the dialogue.
I'm sure that does happen though, like fathers and sons.
But even when there are both,
I mean, you could say, I could argue something like, say, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, though that's a little bit more like not quite that,
but certainly when you get like a cop figure or anything like that, or ex-military. They're normally trying to save a daughter. I think Skyscraper, he had one of each, but the boy got away quite quickly, and then it was all about saving the daughter. Arnie films, right back to Command.
But in Skyscraper, you had like the mother and the daughter, and sorry, the mother and the son, and a father and daughter. I think it's mostly like yin and yang kind of thing. It's like,
they got the son out quickly, but it's mothers and sons and fathers and daughters, and obviously because most of these things have male leads, it's always about protecting the daughter. But in broad terms, the dialogue's terrible. The plot's very cliched, and it's a bit. A lot of the dialogue was very Star Trek, having mentioned Wesley Crusher, in that they've got these plans, and it is a bit like shield harmonics and all that. It's almost a bit like that. But the action's a lot better, and that's a positive, and that's all I can really say. Basically, you have some sort of Monster Zero released in sort of Antarctica, who then manages to communicate with monsters all over the world, bring them out of hibernation, and then basically all of the cities of the world are under attack. And it's Ken Watanabe's character's theory that some of these creatures are benevolent, and Godzilla is effectively on our side, effectively. And that's what the film is. And I have to say, by and large, I really enjoyed it. I'm a bit baffled, but I mean, somebody I know had a newspaper the other day with a 1-star review in it, and I find that laughable. It's somewhere between a 2 and a 3, depending on whether you liked it or not, frankly. If you really struggle with it, it's arguably a 2. If you got on with it, it's probably no better than a 3. But I would recommend having a look at it. It's still got some of the spirit of Godzilla in that there's not an awful lot of him. There's an awful lot of other creatures, and they still use him quite sparingly. And it's funny how much of it has sort of seeped into our culture, in that there were shots in it that I thought, oh, that's classic 1950s Godzilla. And I'm thinking, but I don't know if I've seen those films. So, there were straight-on shots of him that could have been man in suit. And then there are shots of it that almost look a little bit stop motion. And I don't think they ever really did Godzilla for stop motion. Charlie would know better than me. But they definitely were trying to evoke something. But you can see the universe building here. It's quite incredible to see studios still trying to proceed with the whole shared universe thing. There are references to Kong and Skull Island there, and we know that's coming next, the sort of Godzilla King Kong film.
Yeah, next year, I believe.
Yeah, I meant to look into it actually because I haven't read too much. But yeah, there's a Godzilla, and I'm up for it on the basis of this. It's okay, but the dialogue's poor, and some pretty good actors are being wasted. But Bradley Whitford's in it, probably still best known for Josh in The West Wing. There's some really strange things.
It'd still be the bad guy in Billy Madison to me. That'll be his.
He's Josh from The West Wing for me, and he always plays characters a bit like that, like not really first in command, but like a little bit cheeky, and But anyway, the strangest shot of the film is there is a shot in the film, and I don't know if there's a load of cut scenes, because the guy who played Miles Dyson in Terminator 2's in it, but he's in it in like one small sequence, and I don't get that. But it's all right. That's all I would say. I don't quite get the slating it's getting. Whether it's a classic style Godzilla film, I don't know, because I don't know the whole thing well enough. Definitely enjoyed it more than the 2014 film. And most of the bad reviews are pointing to like poor character work and stuff like that. Well, I'd even put this over the 2014 film, because I can guarantee you in 3 or 4 years' time I'll remember more about this film than I do now about the Gareth Edwards one.
I think with the Gareth Edwards, I think it definitely feels like course correction, because I think with the Gareth Edwards one, they tried to make it a little bit more serious and a little bit more thoughtful. At least that was the film he was trying to do. And I think obviously, given the distance that film had, they've kind of thought, okay, well, let's just ramp up and make it more fun. And it seems like a little bit. I think in terms of the bad reviews, I know I've not seen it, so I can't really comment. I
haven't really read the detail either, to be honest. I'm just aware it's got a bit of a kicking.
As a kind of like a knee jerk reaction of a guess, it strikes me as a little bit similar to like what the kicking that Pacific Rim got. In terms of the fact that because Pacific Rim to me felt what were like just a kid's cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon, that kind of like vibe, which is just really, really stupid. But if you go with it, you'll have fun.
Yeah.
And this kind of strikes me as kind of similar to that. So maybe the kicking it's getting is probably just because maybe critics just don't like that kind of thing. I don't know. But what's your feeling on it?
I definitely. I mean, I can see some of the flaws. I've already mentioned dialogue and stuff like that. Characters are talking at each other. The number of times they're looking at something and turn 180 degrees to speechify, and they also have knowledge of things they couldn't possibly know. So they'll turn around and go, his pattern is this. And I'm going, you've just looked at a screen for 3 seconds. There's no way you know what the worldwide pattern is. So there's a lot of Deus Ex Machina in it. But the action's done pretty well. There's a few times it's a bit muddy in the colour palette. It goes very ashen in places and dusty. And I don't know if that's a CG thing or the fact that, or what that is. But sometimes you can't really tell what's going on. But yeah, you're watching creatures have a smackdown. That's what this film is, and it's all right.
It's what you pay money for at the end of the day, isn't it?
Should we move on to stuff we've both seen?
Yeah, fair enough. So what have we both seen? So we start our summer review with February.
February's. We weren't going to cover this, but then I went, oh no, let's cover it. Go on. Alita Battle Angel. Well, I've just talked more on Godzilla, so
yeah.
Talk to me about Alita Battle Angel.
God, trying to wrap my brain about trying to remember what it was about. So basically, this was like a James Cameron project.
Yeah.
I think he was originally going to direct, but he's just been so distracted with Avatar
by not releasing Avatar films.
Yeah, that Robert Rodriguez has taken over. So it's kind of like I would say like a co-production. It's kind of done.
It's still Cameron's script, and I think they were in very regular contact. And I know Cameron apparently had 1,000 pages of notes, and they ended up sort of compromising almost, and he still sent Rodriguez 600 pages of his notes on this film. So there's a lot of James Cameron in this, for good and ill.
it doesn't feel. It feels very much Cameron light. It doesn't feel. I won't. If I saw this film without knowing anything about it, I won't go, "Oh, that's Robert Rodriguez," because it's just not his kind of stuff. So it very much feels like he's director for hire, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because sometimes, especially recently, Rodriguez hasn't been particularly great. So yeah, I actually rather enjoyed my time with this film. I don't think it was perfect by any means. I think it's setting up a sequel that we'll probably never see. I understand like the fact this is based on a graphic novel, isn't it, or is it a book? Or
yeah, Battle Angel Alita.
The fans, for what I can tell, the fans have been pretty pleased by it. I think it's been stuck relatively faithful, and I don't know whether that's because that's why the film doesn't necessarily work to a degree, or not, or whether it was it wasn't like a big hit as much as it wanted it to be. I don't know, but
foreign markets seem to sort of save its bacon, where to the point where I think a sequel now is at least a possibility, whereas off its Western sort of box office, no chance.
So maybe my possibility, but it was relatively okay. It was visually interesting. The action, I never felt bored for it. It constantly moved, and I did kind of enjoy the female-esque lead, but there you go. What do you think?
I thought I kind of enjoyed it as well. It was an oddly paced film.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to be building up to an act that didn't happen. We were building up to something, you thought, right, shit's going to kick off now, credits. Right? And it was like, oh, okay. I can understand they didn't want to stuff everything into this film, and I'm not suggesting it was longer, but I just felt that they were heading to something that never happened. For me, it's kind of... It's got James Cameron written all over it. I do wonder if it would have been a different film if Cameron had done it, basically, because I think his name would have drawn a slightly bigger budget. And there are scenes on... Is it Iron City, it's called? There are scenes in Iron City that look like they keep using the same alley again and again and again, and I'm thinking, for all the money in this, you're actually cutting corners in places.
Yeah.
The Alita character, and now I remember thinking of Gollum when I saw her, because Gollum doesn't stand up as an effect now. The character's really good, but if you actually go and watch The Two Towers now, he never looks like he's quite in the same scene with everybody else. There's a bit where he's wrestling like Sam and Frodo when he first appears, and it just looks comped in really badly. Well, that's the best they could do 17 years ago. I'm not necessarily being critical, but we can do better now. And they made, obviously, Alita's eyes oversized. And I remember, I think it was Rodriguez said, no, it wasn't Rodriguez, it was one of the producers on an Empire show, said there are as many pixels in one of Alita's eyes as there were in Gollum in total. And I'm thinking, well, I can believe that, but it's still got a massive uncanny valley. The eyes don't look right. The eyes don't look real. But it's got, it's very Cameron. Strong female lead, almost discovering her power. I mean, think of Sarah Connor. She didn't start strong. She grew strong. Ripley grew stronger. I mean, the Ripley from Aliens, by the end of Aliens, is very different than she was during Alien. He tends to always have, a slick young man with a silly name. Think Kyle Reese. I always think he's just, picked some random squaddie's name and gone with it. The Hugo character was a mistake. I think the whole love interest was a bad idea, for the simple reason that Alita has no real personality at the start of the film. You can't have a love story for a character that's favourite food was the first thing she ever ate. Oranges or something.
Yeah.
And then she eats chocolate 10 minutes later and that's her new favourite food. So when she falls in love with something, or somebody, that's like her just imprinting on someone. That's like picking up a kitten and the kitten thinks it's your mother. You're its mother.
Yeah.
So the love thing was just a really bad idea, and that character was really bland.
It was probably to inject some sort of stake, because when you do have a character like that, it was like, well, how do you develop any attachment whatsoever? Do you know what I mean?
I know, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
Jennifer Connelly just looked glowering and evil all the way through, so I thought that was a waste of her.
And she was killed off in the most
In a
like
stupid way. It looked really daft, to be honest. The whole fucking there's her eyes and brain. I don't know. But
I mean, it took me a while to even figure it out. I was like, oh well, shit, was that her?
Yeah. Well, I watched Mahershala Ali in Green Book within like days of this, and I just thought, I can't believe he's doing this at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas, like the likes of Ed Skrein, this is the sort of stuff he does. I was a bit shocked to see Jay or Jai, whichever it is, Courtney, in one shot.
Yeah.
And I just think they've really doubled down on a sequel here that's not going to happen, haven't they? I was pleased to see Christoph Waltz do something different, because, the glowering anti-hero stroke hero he's done to death. Mm-hmm. So that was quite nice. It was right.
And he wasn't a baddie?
No. And it was all right. It was cheaper than it should be. It's cheaper than if James Cameron had said, I'll direct it, I'm sure. The love story was a disaster, frankly, a really, really bad idea. And again, very James Cameron. Mm. That was very Sarah Connor, Kyle Reese. Although Kyle Reese was a better character. And it all set up to a final act that didn't happen.
Do you think they should have, like, maybe with the love story, rather than go like full romance, just as like a thing that's just slowly build up in terms of like a more mutual friendship, as in it's like, oh, this is the guy who I've built a relationship over, and then it gets to the end where it's kind of justified to a degree.
I think it's very similar to comparing, say, Aquaman to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, in that Aquaman tried to have like a love story, and it didn't really work because the two of them had no chemistry, and also there was so much stuffed into that film they didn't have room for it. And while I was watching Aquaman, I kept thinking this should have been like Steve and Natasha in The Winter Soldier, a little bit of a frisson, but she's more of a guide, and that's what it should have been. So I didn't love it. I kind of liked it. I'd watch more in this world. I wish it had been Cameron, but having said that, that just would have improved some of the visuals. I think all of the flaws of this film are hard baked into what Cameron is as a filmmaker. Yeah. His films are slightly baggy these days. His films are normally have pretty poor dialogue, and some of the sort of motifs of it, the strong female, the love interest who could have been from a like MTV commercial or something. That's very Cameron, but I enjoyed it. Okay.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, definitely. So I think I was mostly surprised the fact that it just wasn't just teeth achingly awful, but it generally was. It was a pleasant watch. I was actually quite. I enjoyed the action quite a lot, and it gave us some nice, interesting visuals. And it was very much like, oh, spot that person from they were in such and such. Oh, who's that person? And
it's got very little of its own personality though, because it's got so much of many other films in it. I mean, that whole sport she plays, the name of which I've forgotten now. It's kind of very Rollerball, isn't it?
Rollerball.
A little bit of Wipeout, the video game series, in it visually.
Yeah.
A little bit of Speed Racer in it.
Yeah, a little bit. It's this kind of futuristic, kind of to the death Running Man kind of thing. But it's also it's like steampunk type future.
I'd say to kids born any time in the next 50 years, don't bother with sports at school, because they're all going to end up in like fucking death by the look of it. No one has a nice game of cricket and goes home again.
Well, speaking of violent sports, wrestling.
Well, yeah.
How's that for a segue?
Superb. Yeah. Speaking of sportsman, Stephen Merchant. All right. This was a curiosity. I was. They were doling out reviews at Set the Tape, which I write for, and I saw it in the list. Fighting with my family. The Rock in a Stephen Merchant directed, and I'm like, what? Okay. Had no knowledge of the original story, didn't watch the documentary. I have no interest in wrestling. I don't want to admit this, but I think there's a part of me that looks down my nose at it. I don't mean to. It's not a conscious choice, but I think I do. I think I look down my nose at it a little bit. It's bizarrely homoerotic wrestling with them all oiled, and I find the trash talk really fucking laughable, to be honest. But what I have to say as a qualification there is I know an awful lot of people I like and respect who really love it, and they must be seeing stuff I'm not seeing. They know a bit more about it, and I think they treat it for the nodding and winking thing it is.
Yeah.
So I think you're fairly fond of wrestling. I know you've mentioned it in the past. So
Yeah.
I'm not looking down my nose at its fans. I'm saying in my admitted lack of knowledge, I think I just naturally look down my nose at it a little bit.
It's understandable because from an outsider's point of view, you do just like thinking, what the fuck is this shit?
That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's an outsider's point of view.
And I think, have you ever seen that that YouTube video that Max Landis did?
No.
He kind of like does this kind of like almost like telling the story of one of his favorite wrestlers, Triple H, through the visuals of like using basically women like as the characters, kind of thing. Basically, just explaining what the appeal of wrestling is. It's quite cleverly done.
Triple H, I remember one night, 15 years ago probably, I wasn't feeling too well and I went to bed quite early. I was living in a flat at the time. I was, mid-20s at the time. And I put on the radio. And it was on Talk Sport and Triple H was on being interviewed. But it wasn't like a 7-minute segment. It was like he was on the show for the evening.
Yeah.
And he was great. And he was talking about it and he was really engaging. So I'm aware there's a lot to it. But yeah, that's my background to this film.
Yeah.
What drew me to go and see it is, A, it needed a reviewer, and I needed something to do that weekend, but also Stephen Merchant. So I went in with a feeling that it would probably be, there would be it would be a little bit like The Office. There would be a lot of like awkward silences and people saying the wrong thing and stuff like that. And there is some of that, but it's not really. And again, you see publicity stills. And when you look at Nick Frost's character in it, it's a character that's quite easy to look down your nose at. And I think the film is looking down its nose at him a little bit, actually. But it wasn't remotely what I was expecting. Just so much heart in this film. I really, really enjoyed it. I couldn't give a shit about the wrestling aspect of it. And in some respects, I didn't really care whether she achieved her goals in the film. I was just enjoying time spent in that world with those people.
Yeah.
He got great performances out of everyone. I mean, it's the best Vince Vaughn performance in north of a decade, probably.
Have you seen? You probably haven't, but the film we did along. I think, what was it called? I keep forgetting it. The guy who did Bone Tomahawk.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know where you're going.
Yeah, I forgot.
I'm thinking of the publicity sheet for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're on about, but I'm thinking of what I've seen, if you like.
Yeah,
it's that way. It's a bit unfair to say north of a decade because I've not seen everything he's done. But Vince Vaughn has...
he's not done romantic comedies for a while, thank God. So.
Well, he just seems to have taken an awful lot of less care with his career and of himself, to be honest. Yeah. And it was a guy who was just going through on autopilot. He's actually very good in this. The only criticism I've really got of it, and we'll start talking about the pluses, is... Stephen Merchant, in all the publicity to the film, was saying, like, no, I had to come to understand wrestling, and you see it as entertainment, and it's about the story, and it's about the act and the performance. And he's saying all the right things, but he's still looking down his nose at these characters. He is. When you've got Lena Headey and Stephen Frost, that was the guy from the fucking Carlin Black Label adverts, Nick Frost, they are piss pots, the pair of them. They really are. She's a bit cold and weird, and he's like pushing his kids into stuff whether they want to do it or not. And that's why there are scenes in the film that are very important, because we have to be convinced they want to do it. And the fact she goes back when she's effectively told she can go, and the fact that the son goes a bit off the rails, tells us that that's the film convincing us they did want it and they're not just playing out their father's things. But they're talking about, he's talking about all his crimes with a hint of pride. He's virtually shagging his wife at the dinner table in front of guests. This film is looking down their nose at them. They're playing it off as fun, but there's still an element of what a rough family.
Yeah.
But all the British wrestling stuff looks cringe-making as you would expect, and it's meant to. But as soon as they sort of immerse themselves in that world, basically from the O2 onwards, it's really good. It's got tons of heart. She's great. I'm hearing Florence Pugh's going to turn up in Black Widow, and I'm hearing rumours she's effectively going to be the next Black Widow. Fine, bring her into Marvel, because this girl's got talent. The film is just full of heart, and it's really, really funny. I mean, it has got a little bit of The Office to it.
Yeah.
You know, she goes out to, those three models that are there and just says all the wrong things, and there's an awkward silence, and she's like, "See you later," and then walks off, and that could have been David Brent as a line and as an exchange. What did you think of it?
I was going to say, nearly ashamed to say, I think it nearly had me in tears. If not, it did have me in tears towards the end.
Well, I think it probably did me too, but I can't remember where. If I'm honest.
And yeah, I mean, I am. There was a period in my time where I was really into wrestling. I think from 2000 to maybe about 3 years ish. I was like, really, The Rock was my favourite, but it took me back to that time. I think after watching this film, I got fully back into it again. I watched the WrestleMania, started watching old YouTube clips of taking me sort of way back to the Stone Colds and things like that. And it was just like, oh, you know what, this is an art form. Wrestling, even the trash talk, there is an element of what works, and I just went back to the Attitude Era of how it used the time I remember it.
The film calls it out though, doesn't it? Because they have to practice their trash talk.
Yeah.
And she does at one point, and Vince Vaughn just basically rips her apart for just doing such cliched shit from another era.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's just having the confidence. I mean, you watch The Rock back in the day, in his very early days, and you can clearly see he just got a natural knack for it. It's not even necessarily about what you say. It's it's how you pull it off. And he can just sort of see now in hindsight, just what potential he had as a movie star back then. Stone Cold had that pill, maybe not so much to transcend into.
Yeah, because I'm always surprised when ex-wrestlers turn out to be okay at acting, and I'm thinking, why am I surprised?
Well,
think about what it is they have to do.
I think when you think back about maybe when Hulk Hogan, where it's all just oh yeah, this kind of recite a bunch of crap basically, which is kind of almost the same, but now it's almost gone a step further now. It's almost like performance art now. So you have to go on. You portray a character. You have to.
You said it's kind of soapy. It's got a story.
Yeah, normally. Yeah. I mean, they all kind of written, and a lot of it is.
I still don't get it though. When I see on Facebook after one of these events, somebody will post a picture of someone and say congratulations, and they're holding a belt, and I'm thinking, but it's scripted. What are you congratulating them for?
I think it's partly because it's got one foot in reality and one foot in fantasy. Partly is that, but it's also the fact that congratulations, you had that prestige of being a champ.
That title for
I mean, you think if you put yourself in a position of being a professional wrestler and all of a sudden you're working in WWE, and you are let's say you've been mid-tier, and all of a sudden you get a big boost, you get offered a title shot, and Vince taps you on the shoulder and says, this is your night, you're going to win it. That's oh my god. So that's what kind of congratulations almost means. It's oh, congratulations.
Did you get the final fight though? Because the final fight played like a real fight.
Well, funny enough, I actually went back and rewatched it straight afterwards. What actually it was like. I mean, to say it was a fight wasn't really. It was just more a quick, promotion PR thing. Big push for her character. I mean, she the difference is in she didn't do that big speech at the end. It was just and it's funny because she actually fumbles her line. When you watch it, you think how much of a pro the other wrestler was. You can actually sort of see
the difference.
Yeah, you can see a difference. Not to knock on her, because she was she was still
brand
fairly
new.
fresh. but you can clearly see, like, you know, when it comes to wrestling, the most people are doing the work are the ones who actually are seemingly getting beat. You know what I mean?
They blur it in the film a little bit, and and to be honest, it's difficult. I mean, I think I said in my review. I mean, can you imagine Rocky if he'd sat down with Creed to like discuss the result and choreograph it? It would have interfered with the drama a little bit, wouldn't it?
It would.
It's a little bit difficult. So, but I mean, this film. I mean, everyone's good in it. There are some of that sort of Stephen Merchant elements where, I mean, he plays like an in-law's father, doesn't he?
Yeah. Like
the son gets married.
It's like an extended cameo, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but they're just there, you know, playing nice middle-class family, going to dinner at this like council house and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. They are looking down their nose at this family a little bit. I'm convinced still.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone's great, but this film is rises or falls on Florence Pugh. She's great, and actually, large parts of the film, the vast majority of her dialogue is with Vince Vaughn. So the two of them are probably the most responsible for this being really, really good. I thought it was going to wear out its welcome. You know, the family was so rough and crude, and I just thought this is going to tire very quickly. And if you want a hard-ass woman, you cast Lena Headey. Right back to playing Sarah Connor and before, probably. So the fact that it actually brought some heart in and got past that judging the family negatively. And wisely, I know the story takes it that way anyway, but as soon as they move to America, we forget all that and it is all about Paige. So I loved it, and I think it's one of the more important films we're going to talk about tonight, because I would wager fewer people listening to this will have seen this than some of the other stuff we're going to talk about, and I think we're both recommending it when it turns up on home release or Sky or
if possible on Netflix,
whatever your cable provider is, wherever in the world you are.
There's also like a Channel 4 documentary. It's only about 30 minutes, so you can I think you can it's probably available somewhere.
Yeah, that's what this is based on, isn't it? It's from 2012. I don't know what it's called though. Do you?
It's the same title, Fighting with My Family.
Fighting with My Family.
But it's up to the point as it kind of more focuses on them and what they do in England, and it kind of takes up to the point where she gets promoted, like sort of offered, right. And it quickly wraps up by then where when you're seeing her like in the ring, they're like watching like WrestleMania or whatever.
Yeah. And by the way, she was awesome. Credits.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like obviously it's because it was filmed. I don't think they were quite sure at the time. I think it was just like a one-off type thing, but yeah, I think one of the things that works really well with the film it's the juxtaposition between her, what she has to do. I'll add one of the nice sort of touches is it plays off the whole I'm a bit out of place. What am I doing here? You know, I'm absent from home, but also the perceived stereotype of like of the bitchiness of like the other female wrestlers, and she's thinking,
and it turns out they're really not.
Yeah.
You don't even know us. You've been stereotyped your whole life, and now you're judging us because we're basically tits and tans.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm a single mother. I worked really hard. We have been picked up for our looks, not our wrestling ability, whereas you are quite the opposite.
Yeah.
But we have something to offer, and you just judged us.
Yeah. And it's also just like, oh my god, fuck, I'm the one actually being a dickhead, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a nice. It's a nice sort of thing.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
At the same time, you've got a brother who didn't get through and you see what happens to him.
Yeah.
And he pulls it round at the end. There's a bit of a redemption tale to it, but the film is telling you what's in store for her if she doesn't make it. So I really think, you know, early on in the film, you'll laugh because it is that comedy of awkwardness, that cringe making. Bear in mind, if you're watching sort of in North America, which a lot of our listeners have, the guy who directed this is Stephen Merchant, who wrote the British and original version of The Office with Ricky Gervais, co-wrote it, directed it, went on to do extras with him, and then sort of around Cemetery Junction about 10 years ago, they sort of stopped doing anything on screen together. Actually, I think they did Life's Too Short with Warwick Davis as well. But certainly for the last 6 or 7 years. But bear in mind, you had the American version of The Office, the Steve Carell version, spin-off from it. And it's all the same type of humour, that sort of the awkward silences, being invited to laugh at certain people and certain types of people. And the fact that it gets past this, and you're actually pleased for the family. Bear in mind, her father, Rowdy Ricky Knight, I think he's called, is making money off her, effectively. You know, he's slightly exploiting his kids. Yet by the end, when she gets her win and her moment, you're pleased for him as well. So this film is actually a bit of a work of art. They managed to get things to work that shouldn't.
It is it's one of those like life sort of complexes, like the father who loves his kids but is passionate about his thing, but at the same time kind of needs to make money, and she's the biggest selling point, so he has to kind of
like sell how poor they are as well. Yeah. So you almost forgive it because it's like he's doing what he has to.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, if you think of the Rocky series, which is an obvious point of comparison because it's a ring-based sport, I suppose, but sometimes with Paulie they handled it well and sometimes they handled it badly. Sometimes Paulie would be trying to make money off Rocky on the sly, no pun intended, but sometimes he would actually just say to Rocky, I've got this deal and I can make some money, and Rocky would say, yeah, go ahead. And this film sort of almost has it both ways, but it does it really well. Yeah, Fighting With My Family I would recommend to anybody. Yeah. It's going to be a bit of a culture shock to non-British audiences, you know, that British council estate aesthetic from the start of the film. But it's really, really good, and it's full of heart. And you'll see people you recognise, because Lena Headey's obviously been in Game of Thrones for years. She was in the Sarah Connor Chronicles before that. She's been in various films like 300. Nick Frost is best known for the Cornetto trilogy with Simon Pegg. So you'll know those two. And Florence Pugh is about to be a big star.
And The Rock as well.
The Rock is 2 cameos. Well, two scenes, isn't it, really? There's a scene where I love that scene, actually, because they meet Dwayne Johnson at the O2. He's playing himself. And he's great with them. But they keep asking him more stuff as he's trying to walk away, and by the end, he's really fucking pissed off.
He's like mildly, you know, he's like, yeah,
yeah. But actually, when he calls the family at the end, it's great. So he don't think of this as a Rock vehicle. It's a little cameo. It's almost an act of patronage. You know, I lend my name and reputation to this. He's not in it a lot, but the 2 bits he's in are great. But yeah, recommended.
Yeah, recommend. So I also recommend checking out the previous documentary as well. So it's only half an hour as well, so it won't take too much of your time. It's probably worth as a companion to this.
Would you watch it before or after?
I watched it before.
Would you recommend watching it before or after?
I don't think it'll make that much of a difference, really.
Okay.
I think it's just nice to add a bit of context, just in comparison to the fantasy film version. And
is Paige still famous to wrestling fans?
She for what I tell, she is. She had to retire early because of some issue with her spine, but she is I remember looking through old videos and things like that when she is pretty much almost legendary almost at this point. I think she is almost she's been given jobs almost sort of manager type jobs, so she's still a presence that pops in and out. What she does from there on in I don't know, but officially her in-ring career is sadly over, but that's down to medical reasons.
I don't know how much of this was stunt work, but if Florence Pugh's doing any of it, then I'm quite impressed how much she threw herself into it. You feel the pain of the physical training. I mean, the one thing that I think, it's simultaneously looking down its nose at this world a bit, but it's also building it up. In that, if you ever thought, well, it's just scripted bollocks, it's it might, even if it fucking is.
It's hard work.
It's really hard work.
Yeah. And things can go wrong as well. It's it's
stunt based as well. Boxing's a dangerous sport, but you just go in and do your best. It doesn't have the same choreography element to it. So that's really, really good. She's going to be a star. She's not. I don't mean to make this sound base or be too reductive about this, but she's not a looker per se, but that's not going to stop her being a star, Florence Pugh.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this will be one of her early works, which is...
Florence, I think you're a looker, don't worry.
Yeah, but she's deliberate. I mean, it might be the way the film makes her up as well, but I mean, compared to the other women in it, she's played down a bit, isn't she, that way?
She's a different type, isn't she, basically? That's what it is.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to another film you raved about.
What did I rave about?
Captain Marvel.
Well, I mean, we've already kind of reviewed this almost like twice. Yeah. I ranked this, what was it, like, bottom third?
22. Yeah. You ranked it from the bottom of the 22
21st, 20th? Yeah. So, what's to say about Captain Marvel that's not been said? Well,
we don't have to spend that long on it.
No, but
assuming there'll be people, the odd person listening to this, who either didn't hear our review or can't remember it just a while ago, or literally just pick up the odd Cinematronix episode as you do them, we'll just say a little bit about it. From my perspective, it's just incredibly typical Marvel. It's not top tier Marvel. I don't personally think it's bottom tier Marvel either, but I don't even know what I mean by this statement, but if someone said, hand me a very typical Marvel film, this would be in the pile you might choose. It's just very typical. What sets it apart? It's got a better Act 3 than a lot of Marvel. I was with it a lot longer, which is rare for me. It's got like an oppression motif to it. She's got something in her neck, I think it is, that she believes is giving her power, but it's actually a restraining bolt. And when she works her way free of all of this, it is like a slave breaking their chains. And I think that is quite powerful. And she was tied up as that was happening, effectively. So that was a bit of a punch the air moment. I think it leads into its Act 3 better than most Marvel films. Problem is, this is between, forgetting Ant-Man and the Wasp, which was also in there as well, this is bookended or sandwiched between two Avengers films that are just made by more talented filmmakers. I thought this was quite perfunctory. I gave it a strong review. I gave it too strong a review now, I think back on it. But a lot of the sentiment I expressed in that was I still believe, I still agree with. But I think actually you had the most telling thing to say about this film, in that we went into the review and you said, I don't know who this woman is. And I was looking at it as a technical exercise and going, isn't that impressive? Because I think I was naturally inclined to defend Brie Larson anyway, because she took so much fucking shit going into this film, that I was trying not to overcompensate, because that's a tendency as well. When you see a lot of ill-informed shit, you want to like talk it up. So if anything, I was damping down how I felt about it. But Brie Larson was really good, because she starts the film off as a bit sort of green, and then she's a bit of a sort of sassy apprentice, and then she has to play Amnesia, and then she has to play like the friend figure, and then she has to play the fish out of water, and then she has to play like an ant, and by the time she comes to the third act, she's got to play an ass-kicking superhero. And that's several different things. That's deceptively difficult. You know, we think of difficult acting as, you know, tears and emotions and snot and God knows what else. And what she's doing here is an A-list performance. But unfortunately, what I've just described is something you found one of the biggest weaknesses in the film, because it didn't settle on anything, did it?
No. I mean, as I said before, like, well, if you have to describe her, who she is as a character, I couldn't honestly tell you. You know, what drives her, what gets up in the morning, you know, how does she think, you know, what things does she like, you know, where she stands on not saying like on issues, but just where does she stand, like who is she as a person? If you could like point at something,
yeah,
and say,
we're not suggesting she should have looked at the camera, winked, and said, "I'm pro-choice." That's not
yeah, but you know what I mean? It's not like, you know, like, not every Marvel film has to be Civil War where you have to, you know what I mean? But But you know what I mean. It's like well, you can even from the first Avenger, you can sort of see. Oh well, I know who Steve is. I know where he stands. I know where Stark is. I know where Ant-Man stands. You know, you can understand who these people are at a basic level, and I just didn't understand
because
that.
they start off in their typical environments, but our typical environment was some cityscape we're out of in moments.
Yeah.
Because they go straight off out on manoeuvres.
Yeah, I think in hindsight it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to really do when you look at the film like logically. It's difficult to try and impose like a starting point to who these people are. You know, but the film really doesn't typically sort of do much with her character, and that is the fatal flaw of it for me. I mean, in terms of like the oppression angle, like I mean, I could honestly see with what they're going with. I can kind of like see the film trying to tell me that, but I was just like, yeah, but you've not earned any of this. Nothing. I've not had any attachment to this character. You've not sold me on this much oppression, really, and I'm sorry, it just felt forced, and I don't really care about her as much as you would like me to because I don't know her.
The more I thought the filmmakers were better in the smaller moments actually, because none of the action really stood out, and unfortunately, there's only so many places and environments you can set action in, I suppose, on Earth. I mean, when they get to Earth. But of course, you got a train sequence, and all I'm seeing is like the Wolverine and Spider-Man 2 and stuff like that. That both of those did it better, actually. But then you've got this recurring dream thing, mind-reading type thing going on, and it's very Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Very few filmmakers would have thought to design it that way. You'd have got, you'd have got a snippet of a flashback, and then you'd have kept getting longer snippets. But you've actually got bits where she's talking to Annette Bening, and then she turns around and Annette Bening's behind her and she talks to her again. And it's like that vagary of memory, and you do see your memories slightly different because your mind's recreating them. When you remember something, you're not remembering it, you're recreating it. So, I mean, there's a bit, I think I mentioned it in the actual review we recorded, that there's a bit in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind where Jim Carrey is walking around in kind of his own memory, and he's in a department store, I think it is. I haven't seen that film in over 10 years. And he goes up to Clementine is there talking to a man. Clementine is the woman he's trying to forget. In fact, the whole film becomes... Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, if you haven't seen it, is there's a medical procedure where you can erase memories, and people are using it to get rid of failed love affairs, effectively. And then they send out cards to all friends and family saying, do not talk to this person about that person anymore, we've erased her. So he decides, as the procedure's starting to happen and he's in his dream state, that he wants to hang on to her. He's remembering better memories. So the whole film is about him trying to like hide in parts of his brain he shouldn't be. It's a great film. It's a Michel Gondry film. But there's a bit in the film where he goes up to Clementine. Clementine is talking to a man. And when he walks around to the front of this man, he can only see the back of his head. Because his memory was he only ever saw the back of the man's head. And there was a hint of that in this. So in some of them, it's quieter moments. It had some nice touches. I thought she was very good, and I think she could potentially be a star as a character. Brie Larson is already a star. I mean, Captain Marvel. There's a better film to come. I wish it wasn't these filmmakers, because I have this gut feeling that they're nothing more than workaday, apart from those couple of little moments that were sublime, frankly.
They did Mississippi Grind, didn't they? I mean, I don't think I've seen...
I haven't seen anything they've done,
no.
So I can't speak. But bear in mind, the Russos have done.
You Me Dupree.
I think, but they've also done 4 of my five favorite, films in the universe. So in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're just stronger filmmakers, although actually, for the limited amount she was in Endgame, I didn't like the Captain Marvel character in that, apart from one little bit where she talks to Peter Parker, and I'm thinking, that's what you're meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the same.
But Brie Larson can do everything. She just can. She did everything asked of her in this film, and when they need a bit of sass, she can do it. But when you need that little look, when you just need the eyes to light up and you just get a little bit of playfulness, it's there. But the film, on balance, is very mid-tier Marvel. Obviously, you slightly disagree because you got it lower than that, but I think we could probably split this difference and call it fairly typical Marvel.
Well, I find it difficult to call it fairly typical Marvel because nothing about it is fairly typical. I mean, and I mean that to its credit, because it does at least try different things.
Tonally though, and dialogue, and even structure to some degree.
Possibly, yeah. But I will add that, you know, I don't think I despise any Marvel film. So even though I'm slightly down on it, it's not like I'm raging with hate or anything. I just think
what disappointed me is where it comes in the whole canon of the thing. If it had been a Phase 2 film, if it had been a Phase 1 film, we'd have been amazed by it because Phase 1 was a bit weaker and cheaper. But had it been a Phase 2 film, I think we're going, they're starting to up the game here, great. It came in Phase 3. It came a year after Black Panther, which was much stronger. It came between Avengers films that were both stronger. You know what I mean? So
Wonder Woman as well, you know. I think that's also
if we're talking about breaking the glass ceiling films, which you can't help but say both of those were, Wonder Woman was a far stronger film.
Yeah,
I mean, not even, I'll give it the nod, Wonder Woman is a different quality of film altogether.
Definitely.
Although having said that, if you're just talking Act 3s, I'll take Captain Marvel's.
But the rest of the film.
But the first two acts of Wonder Woman are really terrific, and they look very distinctive, and it's just great, all of it. But she didn't have a Chris Pine, did she? Well, to play off, and Samuel L. Jackson was Samuel L. Jackson. He was fine, but they didn't write them particularly. I often say when Marvel get it wrong, the characters talk at each other rather than with each other, and this film was guilty of that.
I also think that they try to explain way too much because this was like technically a prequel. You know, I think don't try and explain everything about Nick Fury because
I did cringe when it was like, that's where they got the Avengers from. It's like, who gives a shit? Let's be honest. And actually, I preferred the eye as unexplained.
Yeah, definitely. But hey, there we are.
A scratch from a cat-like creature, brilliant. And then you go back and watch The Winter Soldier. Last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye. What?
And it was a cat.
A cat? You trusted the cat? What?
And yet he still had him around. Interesting.
Well, it was just a little scratch because he thought it was nothing. There must be some kind of infection in it or something. Yeah. Because what's he called? The Skrull. Ben Mendelsohn shook his head, didn't he, when he was like, it's a scratch, it'll be all right. And he's like, no. So, not the best shot. It was scenes like that I think I could instinctively shoot better than the directors made.
Yeah.
They didn't shoot that. They didn't shoot that very well. But there you go.
No.
On to another superhero film, Shazam.
Oh yes, I forgot about Shazam. I thought this film didn't do as well as it hoped to do, which is kind of a shame. So I think it had a very odd tone to it, but it's an odd tone that I kind of really liked. I heard it being compared to something like, say, Gremlins, which was kind of like aimed at kids, but with more
subversive bent.
Yeah, but with more of like, it plays more to adults, really. But I think I'd really enjoy it. This had a really good sense of fun to it. I mean, I think it knew that its concept was daft, and it just thought, yeah, fuck it, let's go with it, and knew how to balance the adult with the kid-like mentality. And I think even though it has an odd tone, it does. I think it plays to both kids and adults quite well. What do you think?
Feels like an 80s film.
Yeah, definitely.
With better effects. It's, I'm not saying it's like E.T., but E.T., Gremlins, lots of films like that. The Goonies, which is not a film I'm fond of, but just tonally. But and I've got to be careful what I say here because people will immediately run away with Dave didn't like it, which isn't true. But this is this year's Spider-Verse to me, in that every year or so a film will come out that I just don't fully get the raves for. Normally, with the way the world is now, I've seen some reviews before I go in. In fact, I've not normally read reviews, to be honest, but I've seen the general buzz or score or whatever.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of.
Yeah, that sort of just general thing. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I manage to see it just before that. And so I come out with a general feeling to find the rest of the world has just seen it not even differently, just a different strength of feeling on something. And I had that with Spider-Verse. I went to see Into the Spider-Verse, enjoyed it. Bear in mind, I love Spider-Man, right? That came out during all our Marvel stuff. It ended up that I loved the character more than I realised I loved the character, kind of thing. But Spider-Verse, it's like, it's the greatest Spider-Man film. It's the best animated film of all time or recent years, or better than Pixar have done in years. And it's better than anything they've ever done in live action. Pisses on Homecoming, better than most Marvel stuff. Best film of the year. And I just thought, what the fuck did I watch then? Because I watched like a film that was all right. Spider-Verse, I don't want to review that here, but I thought it was fucking ludicrously overstuffed and a bit of a mess. It was fun. I kind of enjoyed it. But that's it, you know. If I'd been forced to write a review Into the Spider-Verse, I'd have given it 3 stars. It turned up on Set the Tape, the site I write for, 5-star review. I'm like, fuck, where did that come from? I'm not arguing with anyone who felt that way, by the way. I'm just saying I didn't feel it. And Shazam was the exact same thing. I kept reading how it was just like this amazing film and how it was, you know, the best superhero film of the year, and it had shown up everything else DC had done, and it, you know, it was better than a lot of Marvel, and it was brilliant, and kids would love it. And I thought I'd seen a 3-star film. It was all right. I enjoyed it just fine. I don't like the visuals. That outfit does not work live action. And I've seen plenty of sort of in-print Captain Marvel, so there are ways to adapt it. I think it was the colour scheme and the lighting, that sort of thunderbolt on it. Didn't like the look of it at all. Enjoyed it just fine, but can't remember much about it now. I'm actually struggling to tell you what happened in the film. There was 1 or 2 funny bits. I mean, there's a bit where they're having like a verbal smackdown across the sky, and like Shazam can't hear it. And that's like a funny take on these superhero things where they do like give each other all dialogue, but it's a busy city and up in the sky where there's like wind turbulence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was funny. That bit made me laugh. When they all became sort of Shazam at the end, I cringed. I know there's comic book precedent for that, but I cringed. I just thought, DC, you're doing yourself no favours as a universe here. I think it hits home how unfocused the DC universe is now, because we're getting wildly divergent tones. Although it wasn't, I mean, I suppose Aquaman had a certain likeness to it, but I liked it.
I think they're in course correction mode, aren't they, though? That's the thing.
But then Wonder Woman 2 is going to come out. I don't know. All right, whatever. It's all right.
Yeah.
And I think that's as strong as I feel about it. I think it's fine. I think all the cast were really good. I got on pretty well with the kid actors. I thought they massively overdid the foster home. I mean, God. I mean, could you find a more loving family ever in history? No one's that nice. Come on.
They must be up to something.
Yeah. But I can remember so little of the film now. I really can. It didn't stick with me. The one thing I will say is it looked cheap. Now, I can understand that. They might not have, you know, it's not a sure thing. They're not expecting massive money out of it necessarily, but it looked cheap. It didn't look like a vast amount of money had been spent on it. The set pieces were quite underpowered, not that impressive. Him going to buy beer and stuff was quite funny. You know, the first time he's trying to get his powers to work and he can't, that's quite funny. The, you know, bullies and all the rest of it. That was funny. Pissed off with seeing Mark Strong in this role. Mark Strong's just like gone back 10 years in one fucking foul swoop. So that kind of pissed me off a little bit. But yeah, all right. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt so. I don't think I loved it as much as like the reviews, but then again, I'm only going off like one viewing, and it's, you know, sometimes you think when a film gets hyped up to a certain level, your expectations sort of build themselves up to something that it can't possibly meet. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it again and seeing where I stand with it. But yeah, overall, I'd say I'd very, very positive. I think I know what you mean with the old, you know, the kids or the kids becoming superhero type thing, but I think that's just kind of part and parcel of it appealing to kids more than anything. I think a lot of kids
might have absolutely adored that.
So I can kind of see that working for, you know, especially for young kids, and I always, you know, vouch that, you know, even some of the horrific nature of some of it, I think kids secretly love that shit. So I think that'll play well. I'm not sure. Obviously, because it's not done well, I do wonder whether it will be popular on home release. Whether like it will sort of go down as more of a cult classic, as rather than a major hit. But yeah, I guess we're just DC are in a kind of state where it's trying to reconsider where it is, and obviously, yeah, we have films that's already commissioned beforehand, like Wonder Woman, and we have this as well, which I do wonder where it's going. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Maybe DC is just going to be a bit of a mess of a universe, but maybe that's just going to be
rather not universe. I don't know how you do sequels to this as well, because isn't the boy going to age out in no time?
Yeah.
But there you go, we'll see. So we'll have an adult turning into a completely different looking adult?
Unless he just passes it on, I don't know, but we'll see.
It was fine. The one thing I'll really say about it is good kid performances, and they're gold dust. So yeah,
they weren't annoying, which
is a win.
Yeah, it's happening more often than not now, isn't it?
But I thought the trailer looked bloody awful, and the end result had all of that aesthetic I was responding to negatively. But the actual end result was better than I could have expected. I was going in expecting an absolute turkey. But at the same time, I've seen 5-star reviews for this, and I just think, really?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was fine. I'd watch another one. I don't know that I want another one. I don't know that I want this Shazam in the same universe as a Batman, a Superman, or Wonder Woman, and all the rest of it. I certainly don't want the cheesy fucking family dynamics in it. But as a bit of entertainment that would particularly appeal to kids as well, great. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it might work not directly in like we're going to see Shazam working with Wonder Woman and whatnot in their films, but they'll always be like their own separate thing, but acknowledge it's in the same world, kind of thing. Like for instance, we get kind of teased of like Superman being there, like, but Shazam will only be in its own film, but you know they might have references to Superman and Batman or whatever. So it could work it like that, where rather than actually have Shazam team up in a Justice League or whatever.
No, because that would just be because he is a boy under all that, you know.
But it was nice to actually see like a kid as a superhero, because I think that's all that is. Shazam is like
a film for kids. Kids just want to be adults, you know.
Yeah,
I would have. I think quite often what Hollywood think kids like isn't.
Yeah.
In the last thing you want when you're a kid is to be reminded you're a kid. And I think surprisingly few kids are that interested in what other kids are doing, which is why I'm always surprised The Goonies was so popular. Because I think the average kid would watch that and just go, oh, boring kids. Give me like a 17 or 18-year-old at least.
Yeah.
That's why, Back to the Future or something like that. Although Back to the Future is the more successful of the two films from the same year, to be fair.
And superior.
And far superior. But I think I could say with confidence I would have enjoyed this as a kid, because it didn't really talk down to anyone either.
No.
It didn't really talk down to kids, so I liked it. Didn't like the visual aesthetic. Mark Strong, get a fucking different agent, please. And apart from that, all positive.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I rather like. Yeah, kids don't like being talked down to. Is basically what I concur. They
It's
don't like.
that it's that tone of we made this for you and we've simplified it all.
I know.
They haven't really done that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, if especially I think especially with like 10, 12, when you get to around that age, I think the worst thing you could do is, well, maybe not the worst thing. Maybe that's a tad exaggeration, but if you like, if you sort of go like, sort of, hey Timmy, well, what's this? Let's have your favourite, that kind of attitude. I think.
Imagine if you were a superhero.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to be very fucking careful with the tone. Now, I'm not 12, so I don't know how 12-year-olds did respond to it, but I would have thought it would have been okay. As a 12-year-old, I'm pretty sure I would have found the aesthetic of this annoying then. I think I still would have been like, why can't you make this at least look a bit more grown up? But apart from that, I would have been fine with it.
Yeah, I think at 12 I would have been like, when's License to Kill out? That was me.
Well, that's the point, yeah. But the thing is,
I was full into Bond then, but anyway.
I had an adult's taste by then. I would have been... I mean, if you're trying to pick family...
Fuck, I watched Commando at 12, so...
I was going to say, I was, RoboCop, I was watching it like 13 or whatever, so... and I had a copy of The Terminator when I was about 11, I think. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that me and you are scum, so that's different. But, like, I mean, to be honest, most kids prefer something a bit more adult.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about something family-friendly that's aimed primarily at them. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Because Shazam is aimed more at them than me. Whereas Captain Marvel, the Avengers, yeah, and people go, oh, it's for kids. It's not really, it's for everybody. Marvel's for everybody, really. And the demographic is nice and even across different ages. This skews younger, and that's not a bad thing. But yeah, two minor problems: the aesthetics, which is part of the budget, and like I say, Mark Strong should not be doing this stuff anymore.
Who would you have in this role instead?
I don't care who's in his role. I'm more interested in his career than I am who's playing the role.
Fair
he's
enough.
He's perfectly capable of doing it, but he's capable of so much more.
Yeah.
And I just that rent-a-villain role, particularly in what is like a superhero B movie, effectively. You know, this is the sort of, I suppose this is effectively, if you talked about it in Marvel terms, this is like Ant-Man.
Mm.
If you know what I mean, this is like the B tier. Probably not a good match, actually. It's not an exact match, because Ant-Man is kind of in the Avengers, sort of. But
in terms of lighter tone, like, you can take a few more risks with this initially.
Yeah, it's a little bit lighter, a bit more subversive, a bit younger, yeah. But it was okay. I'd watch another one. I would hope they would throw more money at another one and just do a little bit of work on that costume, because it's somewhat... comic book faithful, but you can make a few little alterations. That the lighting on that lightning bolt, that's effectively his symbol, ruins it, and that doesn't have to be quite that. I think you could slightly alter the color scheme a little bit, just a little bit. Same colors, just slightly different shades. But those are minor things. The other thing that made it feel really cheap to me was when Superman turned up and you didn't see his head because they couldn't get Henry Cavill. And I just thought, like...
Yeah, because we still don't know if he's actually agreed to be Superman yet.
I know that, but I mean, even if it had been Wonder Woman, like, I'm sure they'd have worked it out.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that, like, it's this B-list thing, so it's not as important, or... I don't know. So yeah, I don't get.
They play it the best they can, like with how it's shot and how it ends, how it's edited.
I mean, I don't know what its budget was, and I can't really be bothered to go and look it up now. But David F. Sandberg, who directed it, has done a lot of horror, and horror doesn't tend to have big budgets. So I can see why they've hired him. It feels like they didn't have a lot of money, but. With all that, they did okay.
So, what's next on the list?
Well, Hellboy.
Oh, okay. So, what did you make? Now, this was another film that got absolutely kicked around, wasn't it? By as soon as it came out, by the
Rightly
reviews.
so, it's fucking dreadful.
Okay.
Well, talking of cheap, this was made on a 50 million budget, and if you're going to use a 50 million budget, don't do CG. Do you know what I mean? Not to the degree they've done it here, because there's a bit where one of the characters actually almost like vomits out the soul of somebody. So you've got...
Yeah, they do that twice, don't they?
They do it twice, and I tell you what, it's almost like The Rock in The Mummy Returns at the end of that film, where you've got the horrific CG recreation of Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
It's almost that bad.
Plus, also, it's also like... It's also the notion of it just looking really weird and gross.
It's pretty gross to start with, but I'm all right with the gross out aspect to this universe. But I mean, just nuts and bolts is the oddly paced. It's so oddly paced. I mean, the film is just zipping all over the place in the first few minutes. I mean, he goes here, he goes to Mexico, then he goes to Colorado, then he's in London, and we're about 10 minutes into the film. By 15, 20 minutes into the film, we've had a retelling of his backstory as well, and he's gone out on some hunt and been double-crossed, and it's like, it reminded me of watching Bohemian Rhapsody. I thought fucking Freddie Mercury will have AIDS by half an hour into this.
He'll meet the manager and he'll like have like 30 odd shots in about 5 seconds.
The reference there is that when you watch Bohemian Rhapsody, right, we're introduced to him, and within 8 hours or so in universe time, he's changed his name, or part of his name. He's gone to Freddie. Mercury came a bit later. He's met the love of his life, who is the one he always called the love of his life, who's actually a woman. Romantically, there was somebody else later, a man. But he meets the love of his life. He sees Queen, or the forerunner of Queen. They're not called Queen. Their lead singer quits. He effectively auditions right on the spot, gets hired. That's all in one day. And literally, like, the next day, they find, like, John Deacon, the one member of the band they didn't have, and change their name to Queen. And I just thought, this film's going to be over in about 25 minutes. At this rate, it's, like, ludicrous casting and a ridiculous, like, compression of events. I know you always get, like, little narrative cheats, but that was, like, ludicrous. I thought, are they going to, like, play Live Aid that evening as well? You know what I mean? And he'll get HIV, and they'll do innuendo, and he'll die, and, you know. It's just, it was too much.
And they'll save Live Aid as well.
Oh, that was funny. There was a bit in... Bohemian Rhapsody, by the way, I didn't think was that bad. But, like, there are bits in it that are, like, really poor. And there's one bit that's laugh out loud funny, because Live Aid, right? Live Aid is the biggest fucking event of my lifetime, probably. They had a...
Probably one of the standouts of the 80s, of that decade.
Yeah, I mean, it was July 1985. They had a 10-hour concert at Wembley Stadium in London. So midday to like 10 at night. And they had an overlapping one in Philadelphia, so that started at like midday there. It might have started a bit later, but my remembrance is they overlap, but they might not have done. Philadelphia might have kicked off, and they did a slightly shorter one. Everyone who was everyone at the time played it. You know, Led Zeppelin reformed to play it and stuff like that. Phil Collins played both concerts. It was really funny because he was interviewed. They had a studio set up overlooking the pitch, I think it was. Bit like you get for like football matches. And Phil Collins came in and he was sat there all relaxed in his chair, having like done his bit. And at one point they said, "Phil, aren't you meant to be catching a flight?" And he was like, "Oh shit!" and like had to leg it fast because the big gimmick was he played both. But Queen played. I always wondered what time of day they played. Actually, if you go back and watch Live Aid, you can work it out by when the sun goes down, because the sun in July of a year, because the sun, it goes dark while they're on stage. So they played like one of the later slots. But what is true is donations went through the £1 million mark while they were on stage. But the film portrays it, that like no one is calling in at all. Like Bob Geldof walks into like the phone lines and he's like, nothing, and they're like, no, and then we go on stage, the whole country stops, and then everyone like rings in.
Everyone's singing Queen at the pub, and everyone
Crying and dancing. It's ridiculously overdone. Why? Because there are two members of Queen as producers on the film, and they're not filmmakers either. So everything is self-aggrandizing and stuff like that. Well, back on point, Hellboy's a little bit like that they rushed the schedule of the film way too much. And it's just not very good. Full stop. I mean, for some positives, he is... I mean, it could be Ron Perlman with different makeup, really.
Yeah.
It's very similar. And in fact, if you see comic book versions of Hellboy, there's a much more angularity to the face, almost like more ridiculous proportions. And they've tried to copy that in the makeup, not entirely successfully. But it feels more like living, breathing skin somehow. Maybe because there's hair on it, I suppose. There's a slightly different sort of feel and relationship between him and Ian McShane than between Ron Perlman and John Hurt, who was the original version of that Professor character. But it's got none of the... With the exception of one set in London, they go to like this ancient society in London. That's a lovely set, a very rich British old world set. But apart from that, it's got none of the style. You look at the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Development or research and whatever it is in the first film, and you look where Hellboy lived. That was like kind of a rich environment. It's actually got none of that. It's set in Colorado in this film. I don't know which the comics is. I've actually read a couple of Hellboy comics around the time of the first film, but I'm struggling to remember stuff. There's no Liz Sherman in this. There's a tease for Abe Sapien at the end of the film because obviously they think they're going to get a sequel, which they won't. But I'm struggling to tell you what's wrong with it, to be honest with you, because I'm struggling to remember it. I'm actually sort of on the quiet here, trying to go back and find my written review of it to see what I had to say, because it was an absolute mess, as I recall. The pacing was absolutely all over the shop to start with, but once it sort of got into it, the dialogue was embarrassing. The dialogue sounded like it was written by a 15-year-old. Wouldn't it be cool if we get him to say this? And the plot was bizarre. I mean, it's always a bad sign when Milla Jovovich turns up. I feel a bit sorry for her, actually, but she's normally appeared in shit. She's married to Paul W.S. Anderson, so she's been in all those bloody Resident Evil films, none of which were any good. And she's done various other things. She is who you go to when you don't have a lot of money and you need a name. And she plays this Blood Queen, and it turns out there's a Arthur and Merlin element to it. And then it turns out Hellboy is descended from Merlin, which is just odd.
But yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere.
Doesn't go anywhere with it, really. And then you got this pigman creature played by Stephen Graham, which is just odd. Some of the accents are a bit all over the place as well. You got this British lady, Alice, with him, and I'm not sure she's actually British. And Daniel Day-Kim. And, when you get... I suppose this would have been true, particularly if you think of, like, 80s B-movies, where you pick, like, an action film where there's no nuance at all in the characters, in that you'll get like a cop, a tough, hard-bitten cop, right, who's just swears a lot, smokes a lot, and talks to everyone like shit. And the films, a B movie will never establish why that is. It's just they're hard-bitten.
It's just it's just guided by tropes. It's like
yeah. Ben Damio's like that. Daniel Day-Kim's character talks to like everyone, Hellboy in particular, like shit, just because this is a film for grown-ups. That's all. It's
just because you have to have like someone to argue against.
I know, but it's fucking stupid, and the tone is all over the place. It's got none of that warmth from the 2004 films. A lot of that is sets, and a lot of that is also that Hellboy was already like ensconced in effectively a surrogate family. with like Liz and Abe and the professor. Can't remember the professor's name now. It's probably in my review somewhere. But Trevor Brutenhelm, that's it. So the dialogue's awful. There's lots of quips, which is just basically people being rude to each other. And Hellboy's version, I know he's quite immature as a character, but he's normally really juvenile. None of the characters have any chemistry. So they could be... I got the impression they'd never met each other. You felt like there'd been no rehearsal time. Because there's been no... You know, you see it with sitcoms sometimes, like the first episode, everyone's really awkward because they don't know each other and they haven't found the characters yet. Well, they've shot on this, on a film that still cost millions, maybe not enough millions, but there you go. And then, like, the colour palette for most of the time is really muted, except this Osiris Club in London, which is, like, really, really rich. And it's, like, violent and silly and juvenile but gory, and it's like it doesn't settle on anything, and then like it races through bits and then nothing happens for like whole sections of the film. It just slows to nothing. I mean, we got to a part in the film where he was back at that tree, and I thought, well, here we are, the sort of third action. The first scene of the film is a prologue from like the year 500 or something, and it's set by this tree. And when they're back there, that seems to be like the third act payoff. And I thought, here we go. This is the final act of the film.
Yeah.
And then that was over in seconds. And I looked at my watch. We were 17 minutes in. And I was like, well, given we rushed through everything in about 10 minutes, how are we only 70 minutes in here? And there's still loads to go. It was just really, really weird. And some of the gore in it, I don't give a shit about gore. I quite like it, actually. But there were bits in the film where you were like, it felt like they were just going, yeah, we're R-rated. You know? And then right at the very end, it reminded me of an 80s film in lots of ways. And that was another way, because the 80s was very like that. Even films I love, like RoboCop. I mean, if you look at RoboCop, the toxic waste sequence is purely... we can do it, and we're in 18 or an R-rated, so we're going to. But the very last scene of the film is like them raiding somewhere else. It's the tease for Abe Sapien. And I just watched that and thought, that's what the whole tone of the film should have been.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Suddenly they looked like a unit, and the action was pretty decent.
And then there's a post-credits thing where they tease Thomas... is it what's his name? Thomas.
I've forgotten what it is now. At the time, I had to come back and find out what it was.
Is it Thomas Hayden Church?
Oh yeah, it was Thomas Hayden Church, but I can't remember what they teased.
The Lobster Man or something like that. That he seemed like a fun character, and it just felt like, why didn't you just do something with that? The only thing, last thing from me, and then Chris, tell me how you felt about it. But the only thing that really sort of delineated him from Ron Perlman is Ron Perlman's comparatively an older man now. And even when he was making these, he was like mid to late 50s. I think he's late 60s now. And there is a sequence where David Harbour is fighting some giants, basically. And while some of it will be stunt work, some of it is visibly him. And so he's a little bit more live and active. But he wasn't the problem. The other thing is, an awful lot of it is like London-based, British-based, and a lot of that is within London. Doesn't really suit Hellboy. But there you go. I thought it was one of the worst films I've seen this year. I've seen worse. It's not like Holmes and Watson bad, but it's down there. It's pretty incompetently made. It doesn't know what it wants to be. As I say, it's comedic at times, but it's gory at times. It's ridiculously fast-paced at times, and then you get sections where nothing's really happening. The characters don't mesh at all. They could have been shot separately and comped together on green screen. The only time I've ever felt like that is when I watched The
the film with Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts years ago, and they had so little chemistry. It looked like they were like two cardboard cutouts of them next to each other. You literally almost couldn't believe they were in the same shot. They had so little chemistry, and that was like this here. How did you feel about this?
I kind of feel like the same. I can kind of I acknowledge the fact that it isn't very good, shall we say? That said, I am a little bit. I am less bothered by it because it is very much more of a B movie, very exploitative, very violent. So like, I know it's fucking juvenile, but if it's overtly violent, I'll probably in a comical, comedic way, or in a kind of like fantasy, kind of cartoonish kind of aspect, I lap that shit up. So there's part of me that's always going to enjoy that no matter what. I didn't hate it, funnily enough, though I can kind of see exactly why this didn't work. For me, it felt like I spent the entire thing thinking, wow, you really are just like rattling through all of this, and I'm like thinking, I kept thinking, wouldn't this be better on Netflix as a series? Like, if you just like took your time, filmed a few extra scenes, you know.
Basically, pass the same amount, double the action, but pass it out over 8 hours.
Yeah,
and double the budget effectively, and you'd have the same quality effects on TV, and I'd have accepted them there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought this probably needs to be on TV because it's Neil Marshall who's directed this, and
Dog Soldiers is always
Dog Soldiers, which is great. Descent, which is brilliant. And then, but since then he's kind of done a very more. Well, he did Doomsday, which is very B movie. It's very much like a throwback to those trashy '80s films, which is exactly. Which makes it fun, but its flaws are exactly the reason why, you know, those films aren't necessarily held in the widest regard. But, you know, for what it is, it's fun. And since then, he's done a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I'm just looking. He's done Black Sails, Game of Thrones, Constantine, the TV series, obviously. Westworld, he's done an episode of. So he's used to like big budget television, basically.
Yeah. So I think now he's kind of settled into that, and I think I don't know what it is. Maybe there's something to that maybe just seems like, no, this is more televisual, and there's just a lot going on here, and I just felt like, I think even in tone, even in the direction, it felt very much like TV as it is now. You know what I mean? I felt like, no, this should be on Netflix. This should be like a 6-episode or 10-episode like series on Netflix, and I think that's probably where a lot of this kind of world would be more beneficial, because you can take your time, you can live in the world more, you can probably experiment a little bit as well. And yeah, I think ultimately that's, if I can pinpoint where it goes wrong, I think it's there. I didn't hate it, but I could see why this fell down completely for everyone else, because it just felt like it was cramming everything in at 100 miles per hour, and even from a cinematic point of view, it didn't feel that cinematic. It felt a little bit more televisual. The violence...
But when you're in a tower block flat in London, that's very difficult to make that feel. You know, you not only have you got no budget, you've gone to places that feel kitchen sink and no budget.
Yeah.
So... I was just a little bit confused by that. There was no hatred, but I mean, even certain tropes from the first film, like him growing the horns and breaking them off and all that kind of stuff. We saw all this with Ron Perlman. This sort of end of the world kind of foreboding around the Hellboy character is revisited here. Something that was a strong sort of trope in the Golden Army. And we see a bit more of it. There's a couple of shots there where I'm like, this is what this film should have been, and it really kind of wasn't. But yeah, you start seeing people like Milla Jovovich, and I feel sorry for her, because there's not much wrong with her, but she's not a mark of quality on a film. And it's
like Jai Courtney.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, I still think he's been a little bit unlucky, actually, and he will be in the Suicide Squad with James Gunn. So let's see, he might get a decent film on his resume at last. But I thought this was pretty dreadful. But what really, really hurt it over and above the Ron Perlman... See, I rewatched the first Ron Perlman one. I was going to watch them both. I went to see this one on a Saturday, and I watched Hellboy on the Thursday, and I was going to watch The Golden Army on the Friday, and I kind of didn't want to. In fact, I watched Hellboy, the 2004 film, and that's not that brilliant either, to be honest. I've never felt... Guillermo del Toro is a visual stylist. I don't actually think he's much of a storyteller, but we can have that debate another time, really, because that's a show or a series in and of itself. But what it did have was a certain degree of warmth in the world, that, like, it was nice being around those characters. I mean, even you like it or hate it, but when him and Abe Sapien are singing Barry Manilow in the second one and stuff, I mean, that was really funny, and you know, it segued between different tones quite comfortably. This film, it's like a awkward gear change, and they pair him up with two people that I don't think he's ever fucking met. I mean, the actors, it feels so forced, and you're putting 80s standard B-movie cop drama dialogue in everyone's mouth, as imagined by a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
It's pretty shit.
It might be the film that you like if you watch it when you were like 12 and you're feeling naughty. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say I think the real winner of this film is Ed Skrein, because
I would say Ron Perlman.
No, Ed Skrein, because he was going to play the that character that Daniel Day Kim played, but because obviously the character was originally written for of a Chinese persuasion, he declined. So he gets to play. I
know he can be all superior about it now.
and avoid being in a bad film, so win-win. Yeah. So,
and he ended up in Alita, which is better than this. So, but I don't think it would have been any better, because he's snarky generally. So if you put him in the role, it'd still be him with really juvenile dialogue.
Yeah,
I thought this was really, really poor. The trouble is, there were little touches here and there that you think you could still make Hellboy work. And you could still make this guy as Hellboy work, but it's gone. We won't see this again now. Unless, like you say, Netflix says, no, we see some promise in this. Would you retool it for TV?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the real disappointment is you sort of... You see it and think, you can see potential, but... You've
wasted a take, and your lead man is somebody who's made his name on television. He might well have said yes to a Netflix series.
Yeah. So,
but there you go. And anything Mila Jovovich in this film is laughable. Everything around her plot and ideas is laughable. But there you go. There you go. Let's move on to a better comic book film, Avengers Endgame.
Oh, fucking hell. Well, after already spending 3 hours talking about that film in itself,
and then the bit where we reviewed it on the ranking show, so we've probably spent about 3.5 hours on the show, so on this film so far.
Yeah, this sits comfortably in the top 3, I believe, in everyone's rankings, if I remember rightly.
I think Becca had it third, you had it second, I had it first.
Yeah, so there you are, nice sort of coverage. Obviously, it sort of sits towards the top. I think this is probably one of the best Marvel have done, and they've ended the series on a high. I think it works well as a kind of a celebration of Marvel's greatest hits, not in the way films normally do that, but
it's not a clip show.
No, in more of a Back to the Future 2 kind of way, but
it reminds you how nostalgic you've already become about something that's still fairly young.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to kind of like see sort of the immediate effects of the first Avengers film, and then from that sort of get like shades of Winter Soldier. You think, oh fucking hell, Plus with all that, it ends Steve's and Tony's arc perfectly. So kudos for that. There were a few tears, and also a bit it's not farewell, but it does sort of how should we say it with Black Widow? because she is getting her own movie, so it's still...
It finishes an arc.
Yeah, I guess.
For now, anyway. We don't know what the Black Widow film's going to be. I mean, you can talk prequels, but the thing is, with comic book worlds, maybe not. You just don't know. As at the time of recording, the character is dead, but it completed an arc as well. A lot of debate over whether her death was cheap and that. Not for me. I think it was. It was the natural position to get to, that she had right from not the first. As I say, don't count Iron Man 2 because she was like a bit of a wet dream in that. But the second, obviously, her second appearance was the Avengers, and from then on, it was, talk of a lot of red in her ledger. Her whole life was about trying to make amends and do something very positive. Well, to play a major role in the resurrection of the universe is a pretty major in the credit column. So there was also debate about the fact that she had no family. So were we saying Clint's life is more important? No, the distinction I drew, and you can hate me for it, not you, Chris, but listeners can hate me for it if they like. I'll stand by it. I don't think your life's more important, but I think your death might be. I think if you've got family relying on you and children and just that bigger footprint in the world. I'm single and I don't have any children. And if I died, let's be honest, not that many people would be that affected. Yeah. But if I had like a wife and 2-3 children, I'd be leaving people fatherless and things like that. So, but more than that, it's just the logical death. It's logical that she dies in service of something greater. And obviously the first snap is to bring people back. Well, that was her family. It was to bring back the people that had given her a second chance at life.
It makes sense for a character to make that choice. I mean,
and her life was empty. I mean, it was a life of going through the motions. It reminded me, it's a bit of a silly segue, but I'll go with it. I watched Stan and Ollie early in the year. And one of the graphic, words at the end of the films that come up on the screen said that after Oliver Hardy died, Stan Laurel spent the rest of his life writing sketches for Laurel and Hardy. And, to use a film example, Dale Griffiths is the character called in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Goes home every year for Thanksgiving to see his wife. His wife's dead. It's just being caught in this repeating loop of a pattern because your life isn't anything else. Well,
what else do I do?
Yeah, Black Widow is trying to keep the Avengers going. There is really no Avengers. It's just this semblance of trying to have some normality and some control because it's the only purpose, it's the only decent purpose she's ever had in life because she was, we're going to find out more on this, but she was a villain in a previous life, if you like, and certainly an assassin. So that all made sense to me. That's the only thing I think I can expand on over anything I said in the review. I just have rarely been that moved by such commercial product. I don't look down my nose at commercial product in any way at all, but I don't expect to get tearful at a superhero film in the same way as I might at Stan and Ollie or something. But I did. I got quite emotional about this film and I came home and it did go away. I was wondering if it would ever go away. But for 4 or 5 days afterwards, I was watching like Marvel films because I felt like with them all moving on and this being a definite end of something, I felt like I wanted to go and get back something I'd lost. It was like a big nostalgia thing. It's a bit like watching your own home movies or something, I remember this or reading an old diary. I wanted to see early Iron Man, Tony Stark in his prime, alive and well. I wanted to see Steve falling in love with Peggy and all the rest of it. It did everything you could ever ask of it. There'll never be a film like it again. It doesn't make it the greatest film of all time by any means, but you don't get 3-hour films anymore, generally. I'm not saying I want many of them, but you don't. You don't get this sort of heart and emotion in superhero films often. You do get emotional moments. I'm not saying that at all. You've had death in the Dark Knight, you've had it in parts of the X-Men franchise and so on, but this degree of mourning that you had for the first act of this film in a world that was unrecognizable from what we knew, you never have to see the aftermath like this. It was like So it did everything you could ever ask of it. Everybody was just terrific in it. I didn't see a single bum performance, which speaks to the talent both of the actors but also the directors. They just get quality out of everybody. And it landed every emotional punch you could possibly have. And I live 35 minutes from the cinema now, across, in another county. So I have to drive home along a semi-rural sort of route once I get out of the city. And I was quite unsettled. I was just a little bit kind of an almost sicky feeling after it. But yet strangely euphoric because they'd landed it. And that's really all I can say about Endgame.
Well, a sicky feeling, as in
It affected me to the pit of my stomach. It was almost like motion sickness.
Oh, okay, wow. Yeah, I mean, I just thought I just admire how things just ended in such a perfect way, and in hindsight, I mean, while we might have different preferences on lesser films such as Iron Man 2, Avengers 2, they still actually matter. They still manage to get, they still follow the character's natural trajectory, and they don't, and it doesn't overtly announce it. I mean, the mere fact that Black Widow's arc really sort of makes sense now just goes just how they don't pronounce. You look at Civil War, and it's like, oh well, of course, that's why she's sticking with Tony, because she just wants to keep the band together. Well, of course, this kind of this whole thing is just explained.
Yeah, because of all of them, Natasha is on the wrong side effectively in that film. I'm not saying the film sells it well enough, but she's not on the side you would expect her to be on.
Yeah.
Particularly as the way she was at the end of The Winter Soldier. She was very much two fingers up at government. You need us, and you'll take us on our terms, seem to be the tone. Well, the whole point of Tony's side in Civil War is, no, you can take us on your own terms, not ours. So, but yeah, it makes total sense. And the thing is, all of the Captain America films and the Avengers films were written by the same people. So even the first Avenger, they were all whatever they're called. I'm blanking on their names now, but the two guys who wrote it have written all those films. So that arc that finishes in Avengers Endgame was set by the time of Civil War. I find it hard to believe. It's not they've had to take something Whedon did and go, well, this is our spin on it and it fits. They wrote this, Marcus and McFeely. They wrote Civil War, so they know exactly what they were doing with Natasha. Yeah, and it's the Avengers must endure at all costs. Even if the cost is something we don't like.
And I mean, I always said it's kind of a shame that we never had a Black Widow Hawkeye film. That maybe that would have fleshed things out a bit more. Plus, it would have been cool to have.
I think Hawkeye might be getting a Netflix series. I can't remember.
Oh, a Disney series.
Yeah,
Possibly.
Did I say Netflix? Sorry,
yeah,
I did mean
same thing though, same principle. I mean, when Disney launches its new,
but it launches Disney Plus later in the year. Yeah, and it's all the money.
Yes, it will be all there.
Everyone will have it, even all the people saying, "I'm buying another fucking one." Everyone will.
Yeah, it's hard to deny when you pretty much own
when
most of your childhood. So
when within a year it will have all Star Wars, all Pixar, all fucking Marvel, all of the Simpsons.
They own Fox now, don't they?
Yeah, and then it will have new product. It will have The Mandalorian on it. It will have the Rogue One prequel series on it. It will have Wanda and the Wanda and Vision film. It will have a TV show. It will have the Loki TV show. I'm sure I've heard there's going to be it's Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but it could be renamed because of what he is now. But they've got a series as well. So it isn't like the Netflix ones where it's like, yes, it's all connected, but it ain't really. It's made by a separate Marvel TV division, which I think was run by Jeff Loeb, I think. Can't remember now. and felt nothing like the films and didn't really matter and were barely referencing each other anyway. This is going to have all like the A-listers. Yeah, of course people are going to buy it. You know, some will torrent, obviously, but like those who want to pay for their product and want to see those things. You know, even The Mandalorian, that's Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau made that. So, and it's a new original story in the Star Wars universe. I think it will do very, very well, frankly. But whether that will flesh out Clint Barton's story, I don't know, because yeah. But even then, I mean, they had to fight. Whedon had to fight to keep that farm homestead stuff in Age of Ultron. The studio wanted to cut it. They thought it was like killing the pace of the film. You know, at development stage, I mean, because obviously once it's in the film, I think it kind of needed to stay. But they certainly wanted to reduce what was there as well. Well, all that time with his family really paid off.
Yeah, so you've given him a purpose.
You've given him a purpose, but not only that, little things like the boys go missing at the start of Endgame, obviously, as well, because they're dusted. And one of them, I remember when he was born, because he was born at the end of Age of Ultron. And let's not kid ourselves, Age of Ultron is not a good film comparatively. But it makes it a better film because it's a more important film, and you watch it now with, you know, it matters. You're absolutely right. So I can't imagine Endgame could have been done much better, to be honest with you. Yeah, you'll get the odd complaints from people who tend to the complaints I've heard have varied from plot holes, most of which are explainable, to not enough action. Well, that's younger men really who tend to want Infinity War again. Well, the whole structure of storytelling, you couldn't do Infinity War again. But there's been a few complaints about, you know, the Hulk and things like that, or they've castrated the character and stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, fuck off. You know, this idea that because some people are a little bit, they've read a few comics, some of them have read a lot of comics, and therefore they know better, and on that basis the MCU have fucked up, and they seem to forget two things. Firstly, it's a separate universe, so that's not right, because in the comics they did it like this is irrelevant. But secondly, they are Marvel. I keep making this argument, but they are Marvel. It doesn't mean they do something well, i.e. you can still think it's poor, but by definition it isn't wrong. Well, what they've done with the Hulk character there is completely wrong.
It's like Marvel, like
they are Marvel. They make the rules.
It's like a next Marvel comic of a character, and they're saying, "Oh, you completely fucked up that character." It's like, well, no, they just
they just took it in a direction you didn't like.
Yeah, or did a bad job this time, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, but it's the idea that where they're inconsistent with comics, they've got it quote unquote wrong. Yeah. And it's like there is no wrong when you're Marvel. Right can still be poor, but it's Marvel. That's like I write a character, and then I make, you know, do a TV series with this character, and in the second series I take them in a different direction, and people tell me I've got that wrong. It's like, well, it's my character. How can I possibly have got it wrong? You know, it's a bit like if you looked at something like Extras with Ricky Gervais. He shouldn't have had a hit sitcom in the second film. That's not right. It's like, well, it's his character. What's right is whatever by definition he writes. But you're welcome not to like it, obviously.
Yeah, but I think, you know, most people are pretty positive about this.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's been overwhelmingly positively received. And actually, even the sort of trolling I'm hinting at there is hardly anything, to be honest with you. I was just reflecting on a few of the sort of more negative things you do see, and they fall into either specific character decisions, i.e. what they decided to do with the Hulk, or plot holes, which I think most of which are explainable, or film's tone, which seems to just be really what you're saying is you preferred Infinity War, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but
I tend to go light on plot holes anyway, just because it's a movie, so let's not, you know, sometimes you just got to shrug your shoulders and go like,
it depends.
You know what?
It does depend what it is.
Yeah.
does depend what it is.
But sometimes, especially when it's something like when you're doing something like a time travel stuff, I think especially with things like that, I mean, yes, there's an element of okay, well that's
try to be consistent.
Yeah, that's not consistent with that, but you're entering into unknown universes of lore. So when people are saying, well, that wouldn't happen because of that happened, it's like, yeah, but you kind of have to go with the Austin Powers way of like, I suggest you just go along with it.
I've worked my way around most of the. The other thing is, I think I've worked my way around most of the quote unquote holes now. I think I explained many of them in the reviews, or we did between us anyway. The ones that remain, I think the one thing that audiences are now very bad at is assuming anything that's not explained is a mistake. So Steve appearing at the end of the film, we got, no, it would have been an alternate reality, so that's not right. And it's like, what the Russos said in response to that was, yeah, there's a story there. And it's like, you just haven't been told yet. It doesn't make it a whole.
Yeah.
And actually, it could just have always been, which I think the directors and the writers seem to slightly disagree on it. The directors seem to disagree with me in that there's a story, not disagree, but hint that there's a story I haven't thought of. Whereas the writers seem to be hinting at the "it always was" explanation, which is the one that was in my head.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and it doesn't matter, and we don't need to get into plot specifics. But the fact is, just because something hasn't been explained yet doesn't mean the universe it's set in doesn't know.
Sometimes it's better not to know everything anyway.
No. And actually, emotionally, it was perfect having Steve there. And what I liked was, obviously, he put his hand up and we saw the wedding ring.
Yeah.
No, he put the other hand up first. He put the right hand out because he shook hands. But then he put the left hand over the top. Well, there's two things about that I like. Firstly, that was to get the wedding ring into shot. But secondly, that's very Steve. The comforting hand on top, the extra degree of warmth. I like that. But yeah, I just loved the film. I thought it was terrific.
And the fact that, you're not going to tell me about her? He goes like, no, rather not.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I will.
I just had an Arnold Rimmer flashback then. All you need to know is, I gave her one. Yeah.
Or he could have gone like flash art.
Yeah.
You got to tell me about her? Her? Which one? Woof!
Yeah. But Steve, where have you been?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I want to see like.
Bells.
Yeah. Now I really want to just see like Captain America just redone as like Lord Flash art now.
Yeah, but we already said that about Thor, didn't we? He should have landed Infinity War and Wakanda and just gone, it's me!
Which one would have been Ace Rimmer?
Yeah. Ace Rimmer, yeah. Yeah. One of them could have been Ace Rimmer.
What a guy.
Yeah. Where have you been? Had my highlights done. Actually, perfect segue, because I read today that in talks to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Keanu Reeves.
Oh, yes, so that leaves us to John Wick 3. Or John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum.
Paramedic.
Parabellum,
Parabellum, yes.
Or which I learned is Latin for prepare for war, to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Go on, you go first.
Okay.
This is right up your fucking alley, John Wick. Anyway,
well,
I like it too, by the way. But go on.
I love the first film. I think the second film is a good mid entry. Pardon the pun. And it sets up for a really good sequel, and I have to say, I am mildly disappointed on one aspect. In terms of action, not disappointed at all. I really like the action. The action scenes are good as ever. Probably the best in the series, really, because I think the stuff they do. The midway action scene with the dogs, I just thought was just actually, when you think about how hard that must have been. There's
got to be some CG in that, but not all of it.
Yeah, like, just how you managed to do it, which I thought was just great, and the amount of work that's gone into all this, the creativity of the first half an hour, which is
Did
just
you get a Jackie Chan vibe off the knife and axe fight?
Yeah, I mean the fact that he uses horses as a weapon, like,
But when they're throwing axes and stuff
Yeah.
and breaking cabinets,
yeah,
that improvisation and grabbing what's there was very Jackie Chan, I thought.
yeah, definitely, and also like just because he got hit by a knife, that doesn't mean to say they're out of it, they're dead.
Yeah.
It was like, it was still more constant fight, which so that added the element. So yeah, there was the actions was never an issue for me. I thought brilliant. So from that alone, I'd recommend, because end of the day, John Wick's an action film. That's what I came here to see. That's what I paid my money for. The only slight disappointment is, I think, I'll this is going to sound like a really daft thing to say for a John Wick film, but I was disappointed in the story. I don't think the story sort of takes us anywhere, really, because I think one of the good aspects about, when you go back to the first John Wick film, it's a simple story. I'm not saying we need like anything overtly complex, but we need a satisfying A to B story which we understand, and we see, and we empathise with John, and we understand like the pain and the sacrifice that he has to take, or to do what he's gonna do. So with first John Wick, it's pretty, it's simple. We understand it. It's clear, but we all empathise with it. We understand where he's coming from. It's that kind of like that, that sort of like the heart of him's been taken away, and now he's sort of trying to scramble that back, to find sort of a part of him again, or just that kind of like, well, all's left of me is death, so that's all I've got to do. Here, I think it's a bit more confused, and I don't think it sort of leaves John Wick in a place any that he's different from last week. I remember when the second film came out, and the writer was talking about referring the idea of doing something like A Man from Nowhere, and the idea which was like, well, John is in a place of like hiding. He's like, well, if he sticks his neck out anywhere, his life's in danger, and he sort of established that doing John kind of, rather than doing something for him, like to like survive or get revenge, he's actually having to do something for someone else, and that idea was like, yeah, that makes absolute sense, but they didn't go down that road, and I struggled to find out the justification of what exactly it is they were going for with the character. It just felt like they were just repeating like a similar sort of thing, and I wasn't quite sure of what ideas they had in mind. I mean, I think they're setting up for a 4th film, which is okay, but still, I guess it's like it puts John in a place where he's going to go against the high table, which we were kind of already there at the start of the second film anyway. So, that's probably my main criticism of 3, even though to most people it sounds very much like, Chris, come on, it's John Wick.
Well, the first film was really, really tight. What's concerning me is the running time's growing each time. Now, not wildly. I mean, we've gone from like 100 minutes to like 2 hours to like 210 or something. But it's in the wrong direction for this franchise. This franchise needs to keep things tighter than this. In terms of overall quality, the action's the best we've seen. It really is. The whole knife fight section was great. The use of horses was great. The use of dogs was great. Although I have a problem with that sequence. Yeah, there's definitely a butt coming here. I mean, I gave it a really strong review, but it's got a more organic setup. I mean, the second film, bear in mind, they released John Wick, no guarantee there was going to be a second film. So the second film, I said this the other day on one of our shows, that Santino could have turned up at the start of that film and just said, John, we need another John Wick film. Are you happy to oblige? That's what it felt like. It got. The second one went a little bit too deep, almost in the world building. I like it. I like the aesthetics of it, that 1930s/40s exchange feel, but with modern technology, where all the contracts get done and all the rest of it. I like all that. But, I thought the bulletproof suit was a step too far. I mean, the aesthetics were great because the suits were beautiful. So, I mean, everything they dressed him in looked great. And you had scenes set in Rome and things like that. But I just thought, how much you go with the second film is how much you can buy into this universe. Whereas it's not that important in the first one. Yeah, they're handing off over coins, and you've got to learn that the Continental is sacred ground, much like holy ground in Highlander or something. Where that idea might well come from, thinking about it. So this film has a much more organic start because it follows straight on from the second one. But I didn't feel it did quite build on that sense of holy shit we had at the end of the second film.
Yeah. Where
suddenly he's in New York, hurt, alone, and about to have every fucking hitman in the world on him straight away. And he's got this dog there, and it's like, what the fuck are we going to do? Because he's not going to let that dog die after what happened with the first one. So all of that, and actually he gets rid of the dog instantly, which narratively you have to do, but again, that's taken that away.
Makes sense for him to do as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. But again, John Wick versus the world lasts about 15 minutes, really. I guess narratively you've got no choice but to do that. And we do get rewarded with wonderful action sequence. We've got him horses kicking, and then we've got a fight when he's on a horse. Then we've got a bike fight. The bike fight's amazing because the shots done in like one. There are action beats done in a single shot that would have about 5 or 6 cuts in it with any other filmmaker, and things happening in shot that you think, how did they do that? How did Keanu do that? Did he do that? That sort of thing. Where the film really falls over for me, and I say fall over, I gave it a 4-star review. Don't panic, it's a very good film, but the Casablanca stuff is fucking pointless, and it bothered me. It bothered me that we've got a film. The film series is getting longer, and they're wasting their time. He goes to Casablanca to get effectively a path out of his current position. But as soon as he comes back to the States, he shits on that immediately. So there was no point in going there. He basically went there to lose a finger, pick up a tailored suit that they couldn't possibly have known he'd been there to get, introduce Halle Berry because presumably Halle Berry just wanted to appear in a John Wick film. She's fine, by the way, but can't really see the point.
Well, also the fact that it reveals that John Wick has one of them, blood...
the pact.
Yeah.
What, tokens?
So why couldn't John Wick just go like, all right, well, hang on, let me just jump on a plane to Casablanca. Hey, Harry Belly, can you do this job for me? And then,
on what phone?
Yeah.
Then they go into that dog action sequence, which was thrilling me for about 90 seconds. Honestly, I just thought this is so inventive, and then it went on slightly too long, and I just thought, I'm not convinced this act of the film's going anywhere, and this action sequence is too long, and it's purely because they had an idea around something with dogs, I think.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, although it was done much better, the whole end of Fallout was built around the fact Tom Cruise wanted to do something with helicopters. They retrofitted to that, and I felt like they'd retrofitted it to this idea. And when they eventually get to the main man, not the main man, but the sort of sub-main man, if you like, it's the bizarrest casting I've ever seen in my life. Because if you want a swarthy Italian, you cast Jerome Flynn. So that was weird. And like I say, he comes back to the United States and immediately shits on that pact. All he's got to do to be safe is come back and kill Ian McShane, basically. Winston. And as soon as he comes back, he's decided he's not. And I'm thinking, you've gone over there, wasted our time, lost your wedding ring finger and your wedding ring for absolution, which you've been given a path to, which you are now going to ignore. And then the build up to the final fight with the Zero character, who I loved because he's a fanboy of John Wick's.
Yeah.
I love
Mark
that.
Dacascos is great. I was
Isn't,
happy.
isn't this fucking cool? You know what I mean?
I was happy to like actually see him in in something that was actually quite a mainstream film. I was like, oh, good to see you there. But yeah, the sense of him being like
Lovely touch, making him
yeah.
such a big fan, particularly as when he's hired by the what's she called? What's that character called?
Oh,
She's kind of like an ombudsman almost.
yeah.
But anyway, she comes in, and I've forgotten now. But she comes in and hires him to do this job, or forces him to do this job. And he's quite businesslike. He's running like a little sushi store or what. And he's like, yes, and all the rest of it. And it's like she's hired a no-nonsense guy. And when he finally catches sight of John Wick, he's so fucking excited to see him, without it being belaboured as a joke. But it was suddenly went into video game territory because the number of people he had to fight to get to him while he's suddenly climbing through this building. I'm thinking, this is going on too long. The action's good, but it's only rinse and repeat on what we've already seen. And you are dragging out a running time that's already been dragged out by an unnecessary second part. I think they keep improving the action each time. I thought actually the weakest action was in the second film because this whole flipping them to the floor, almost judo style, putting a leg over the top and then shooting them in the head was getting repetitive. So in this one, you've got horses, bikes, knives, lots axes. So the action is arguably better. It's gone less on aesthetics, so the beautifully tailored bulletproof suits and all the rest of it. There's so much I really, really enjoyed about it. I had a really great time. I don't think it's markedly weaker than the other John Wick films because you're balancing improved action and a much more organic start against maybe tighter structures, and in the second one, better aesthetics, because the second one is beautiful. It's probably the best looking of the John Wick films. But there's just this slight sign of bloat. And also, you've got to be fucking careful not to make him a Superman. We know it's already like a low-level superpower anyway.
Yeah.
That he's strong and powerful and will win hand to hand. But that fall at the end, I just thought there's nobody in the on Earth who would fucking survive that.
Well, yeah, that's it. It got me thinking, like, because
you're pushing this too far.
because I got the impression, like, I said, well, naturally, Winston wouldn't just do that. Obviously, he intended him to survive, but I was thinking, how's he supposed to survive that shit? Like,
well, yeah, we had the precedent from earlier in the film about shooting in non-critical places.
Yeah,
because he ran to the doctor. If you remember, anyone listening to this who's seen the second film but not the third, he's given an hour, which gets Winston in trouble. Winston, his place gets deconsecrated, which basically means they can do business there now, and he's asked to leave and all the rest of it. This all kind of gets reversed by the end of the film. But that hour is like sacrosanct because of the rules of this universe. And he gets in to see this doctor who's got like minutes to do something with a knife wound. The suit seems to be bulletproof but not knife proof. There's a brilliant set piece at the start where he kills someone with a book, which is just done really well, but he is stabbed in the shoulder. And that is being stitched up, and then the guy realises they won't believe I didn't go over time, you're going to have to shoot me. And he points to where to shoot him, because he's a doctor. He's saying, if you shoot me here, that's not going to kill me. So I knew what Winston was doing, but that fall was too much. I'd have preferred if they didn't show it, or if they just show him go off the roof, and then the body's missing. But we saw the fall in all its glory, him bouncing off stuff on the way down.
Or just have Winston go proper bad guy. But that would have been more shocking, because it would have been like, oh well, that's a twist. Whereas here it's just like, oh well, that's just.
Well, it's not proven one way or the other. They can still retrofit that when they write number 4 if they want. But I just think there's I still enjoyed it. I don't think it's ridiculous. It's not like we've gone from Batman to Batman and Robin.
No.
It's still recognisably a John Wick film, and it's not like we've gone from 100 minutes to 3 hours. We've gone from last time out 2 hours to 2:10. But across the series, we've now added half an hour to the running time. This man is now virtually indestructible, although the amount of pain and distress they put him through is growing each time. And
I think that's what makes it, though. I think that's the difference between making him, while he is kind of like indestructible.
Yeah.
You are going through the pain. You are feeling like each punch or blow.
That is a
or
big redeeming factor.
Yeah.
It is. So I don't mean to be as critical as I'm sounding. I had a great time with it and I gave it a great review. But if there are two things, watch the running time, tighten the structure a little bit, and let's just try to give John Wick a little bit of purpose, because the film started up as the world versus John Wick, and that got thrown away quite quickly, and then they took him in another direction, and then he threw that direction away straight away, which makes the film feel a bit unfocused. But I enjoyed it.
I think you're right. It just seems like the whole setup, because I think what I had in mind was what we're gonna see in the next film, John Wick like hiding like somewhere, and he interacts with someone or like a group of people who are fairly innocent and who are seemingly getting like shit upon. But it's one of those things like, if I take action, I'm damned, and it's just that I would have thought that would have been such a great thing for like a premise.
Yeah, because there's hints of Bourne in that, because Bourne is rather hunted. There's also hints of something like the Assassin's Creed franchise, and if you think I'm talking to the video games, not the terrible film, but Assassin's Creed has a multiplayer function in it that I've rarely played because I'm not into multiplayer particularly, but it's like almost like a death match, but you don't know who the assassins are, so you'll be in a crowded room, a crowded street, and suddenly someone will step out from a crowd and stab you. That sort of thing. That's kind of what I thought John Wick 3 was being set up to be. Like, he was on the run at the end of the second film, and he was looking at people, and it was like, are they not? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then this film seems to mark time to bring us back round to be roughly in the same place at the end of the film. And I'm thinking, are we ever going to get John Wick 3, or are they just going to keep like postponing it?
Yeah. There's also little things about, like, you know, you get a sort of wind of like it's just like the police also have their own little separate thing going as well. It's like this is like the world we live in, where like in the world they live in, where the police themselves have their own sort of rules and world they can go, and they could explore that a bit, and they haven't really. We don't sort of see any other like things going on, and the fact that sort of they're having these fights in public places and no one seems to be caring that much at all. Maybe that's part of the world. Maybe everyone's like 30% of people there are assassins, and this is just common.
Bits of it didn't work. I mean, from a representation perspective, it was nice enough to see the character, but the character that put all this sort of into motion, and I'm going to look up what I've referred to her as. Hang on a second. What did I call her? The Adjudicator.
Yeah.
That was it. Asia Kate Dillon. That character didn't work at all. Again, that was like bad TV film. They made her so blank and emotionless, and I'm thinking, all right, I know they've got their rules here, but like John Wick at some point joined this world voluntarily, and Winston will do anything to stay in this world. And they're both characters with at least some warmth and humanity about them. And yet every time you give us a representation of the world they joined, it's these cold, emotionless, almost refusing to act, and I mean as in acting, people. And it almost doesn't work. So every time she was on screen, I was cringing, because it was like watching someone try to play like a Vulcan or something. It was like, no.
That was another person from Orange Is the New Black. It's like I get the impression that the makers really do like that show, because they cast like Ruby Rose as like
in the last film.
So it's just.
Well, I watched about 10 episodes of the first series of that, and I haven't seen it since. So I'm
Same.
not aware of this actress. Well, I don't know if they refer to themselves as an actress, but whatever. It's non-binary. They use those pronouns rather than he or she. So, not meaning to cause offence at all, really not.
No, I was laughing at. Sorry, I was laughing at the. I don't know whether they refer themselves as. I see what you mean, as an actress, as in terms like, well, I may act in films, but I won't say.
But I'm not really. No, I just mean I don't know. Actor, actress, don't know. Whatever the case, and I'm not meaning any offence there at all. It's like watching someone play a Vulcan badly.
Yeah,
I don't think. And it's like at some point you are going to distance us far too much from why these people ever joined this world. So, you are allowed to crack a smile or show some anger or show some kind of emotion. You don't have to walk around like a fucking robot.
Yeah.
So I struggled with all of that. But Zero was great. I love the little wrinkle of, being a fanboy.
Yeah.
I love the visuals of all of that. The knife sequence at the start is fantastic. The bike sequence is great because things are done in a shot that I wouldn't think actors could actually do in a shot. Stunt performers might be able to, but I'm sure that was Keanu. The use of horses, all of that, the use of dogs. I may not have loved that section of the film, but great. And actually, it makes some sort of sense for him to visit a different environment at least once a film, just to vary the palette. But just little signs in this film, just tiny little signs. Yeah, got to watch that. Just watch that next time. Be a bit careful with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're overtly critical because I think we're actually quite, we're more or less fans of it.
We both really loved it. So.
But it's like we love something. It's like, no, but...
No, careful. Careful.
Don't ruin it!
We want to love this next time as well.
Yeah. But again, Keanu is great. I mean, I one of the things I did pick up on was like the suggestion you have, like, make him move less and talk more, and I got that, like, at least in the first third there was a lot more action and less talking.
Yes, I will say that. I there will be statistics that might prove me wrong, but just going off feeling, I felt like the second... See, I think you can make a case for any of the films, in that the first one is tight, it's lean. The second one is probably physically the most beautiful. It deepens the world. The third one has some of the most inventive action for me. But actually, I think 2 might even be the weakest. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But they had him say too much, and I just felt like, shut him up. But it was mainly it was the open the door in there to the van and there's Scott Lang. It was, are you available for another John Wick film, please? At the start of the film, yeah. I thought 2 was quite clunky. But you can make a case for any of these films. I've just enjoyed it. I just don't want them to ruin it, because Keanu's age notwithstanding, I think they've got a few more in them, but they've got to be careful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess they're going to do like another one, maybe a 5.
It's the next one's been announced, 2021. Yeah.
But then, as much as I do like these films, I almost kind of want the director to move on and do something else. Even if it's with Keanu, I kind of want. Can we just move beyond John Wick? I mean, I do like 3 being enough as a trilogy, and then move on. So the fact that they seem to...
Well, I think they've tossed away some of what I thought was going to happen with 3, and delayed it a film almost. So maybe there is a 4th one there, but they're talking like, yeah, we'll make them as long as people want them, and it's like, no, don't. No. But having said that,
leave them wanting more. That's the way.
Yeah. But hey, they're going to do another one, and that's absolutely fine by me. But yeah, it's not. The problem is, it's either a man hunting something or running from something. It's got a limited range of things you can do with it outside of a TV show where you can slow it down and investigate the world a little bit. It's not like James Bond. This is not going to run with who's going to be the next John Wick. This doesn't have like 20 films in it, I don't think.
Yeah. Plus, also you got the TV show, haven't you?
The Continental, yeah. Well, I don't know if that's what they're going to call it, but it's going to be set at one of the Continentals. And I think that'll expand the world a little bit, and that's fine. That'll either be brilliant or terrible, because there's something inherently hilarious about this world.
Yeah.
But some of the aesthetics are great, because you've got like this exchange that looks really 1940s telephone exchange, like something you'd see in Agent Carter. But they're all covered in way too many tattoos, and they're doing like loads of stuff on paper, but they've got high-tech computers there, but it's got a hint of stock exchange about it as well. So there's loads of like interesting things to this world, but you either delve in and look at this stuff, or you've got to go one way or another. You've either got to expand this world, or you got to kind of stop it. You can't just keep doing John Wick, literally another John Wick film every 2 years forever, because how much more can they really have to say here?
Well, that's the thing.
It'll just become...
Do you really want John Wick to say anything?
I don't want him to say very much at all, but I don't want it to become like any number of series that just became a bit direct to DVD.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it would I'm not saying it would in success level, but that's standard where you get to film number 8 and it's just fucking rinse. Death Wish. I don't want it to be like the Death Wish series where, by part 5 it was a very old man doing a very pale copy of what they were doing 10, 15 years before.
It's not Simpsons cutaway. Death Wish 9. I wish I was dead.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we're both more positive than we're sounding in that this is in line with the standard of the other 2 John Wick films. It's just if you've got a nitpick, there are little things where you're going, they're just edging in the wrong direction there.
Yeah.
But having said that, some of the little edges in the wrong direction from the second one they've pulled back from.
Yeah, if this was like its own action film, like let's just say this was like just a new Keanu action film, we probably wouldn't be like as down on it because would have been, oh great, it's just the actions in this is brilliant. It's exactly what we want.
The action's great. It's very Asian. It is very Asian cinema, and it's redefining the language of like Western cinema, and so that means the John Wick films are a lot more important than most people would give them credit for, and I think you could make.
Well, it's gaining more popular, isn't it? I mean,
if you use John Wick, the first one, as like an avatar for the whole series, John Wick is will probably be in the top 20 films of the decade. When you think about importance, and stuff like that, certainly to the standard of say a Fury Road or something like that, or one of the Raid films, it's up there with that. So. I don't like it as much. I prefer when they keep him as physical as possible. And actually, that means he's a good actor. I mean, physical acting is a skill, and he's phenomenal at it. So he deserves all the success he has. But, the less they can have him say, the better. And, you're right. I think they corrected a little bit on this. He said more in 2, which is probably why 2 on balance remains my least favourite of the 3.
So, I think also it's doing really well now, isn't it? They're doing progressively better, so they are like being more popular.
Yeah, I mean, first weekend it passed the whole take of the first one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and didn't this actually overtake Endgame?
Yeah, I mean it dethroned it, but Endgame was in its like 4th week or something. But yes, it was the film that ended the reign of like Endgame at the top of the box office charts.
So what else is next? We've got RocketMan after that.
I think we got RocketMan to go, and then that'll be it for tonight, folks. There'll be a part 2. We'll talk maybe a little bit about what's to come, but there'll be a part 2 at the start.
I'll catch up on Godzilla, and we'll have X-Men.
Well, what have we got? We can talk about that now and then go into RocketMan. We got X-Men. What's it called? Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be great. Men in Black International. The Lion King. We've got a Tarantino film. There'll be more. I can't. What else is coming? Do you know?
Hobbs and Shaw.
Hobbs and Shaw. That's probably actually the one I'm most looking forward to, and I couldn't even think of it. Just because
Spider-Man Homecoming.
Spider-Man Far From Home.
Oh yeah, sorry, yes.
Yeah, so that's Toy Story 4. So I mean, what's that? That's already 7 or 8 we've just named. So, and there'll be a couple we haven't thought of that we'll come to, but so there's still plenty to come in part 2. We'll just finish part 1 now with RocketMan. What did you think, Chris?
I really liked it. I'm not quite sure it's quite the 5-star review film that the reviews are suggesting, though I do find it hard to pick flaws. The only thing I will say is I think it's probably a little bit televisual. I think something about the way it ends did feel very jarring for me. It felt very much like I don't know. Maybe it's just like the currency, the fact that Elton John's like still around and still has a career. It just felt a bit like, oh, I'm not used to this. I think what the things I really liked about it, first of all, Taron Egerton, I think nailed that performance. I think he just sort of he did the thing because I was, funnily enough, I was just watching a few clips from the Iron Lady randomly. I've not seen that film, but and that was
you needed like spank material, did you?
no, it was one of those random things that just like came up like on recommendations for whatever reason. I was like, oh, okay, I was just watching it and that's the one where Meryl Streep won an Oscar, and I sat there thinking, my God, she's awful in this, because she's doing that thing right where she's basically sort of doing the impression of the spitting image puppet.
Right.
And it's like
the voice slightly too low, really mannered, and
she's basically doing an impression rather than a performance, whereas he's actually doing a performance. He is basically playing Elton John, while he does sound like Elton John. Does a very good like for voice, like even singing he sounds similar, but it's in the tone in which he speaks. It feels very organic, it feels natural, and he absolutely fucking nails it. And also one of the things I actually really liked about it was how it frame device was much more centered of his addiction and where that stems from, and I felt like the film had actually something to say other than like, this is Elton John's life. It felt very much like it was making a point how where these problems can start, like, develop from childhood, and and the consequences of that, and on what you can do about it, what can you do about it. Some of it's not your fault, but at the end of the day, it's what you do about it, to move forward. So I think the film had quite positive things to say as well, and not just a blatant, oh well, here's a biography of Elton John's life and a greatest hits show. It did feel much more than that, but I think there was just something about it which just didn't quite feel like a film wholly, really. It just felt a little bit more televisual.
I thought it was a stage musical. I thought it was a stage musical, particularly the shot where I thought it all the way through, but the shot where I really thought it was right at the very end in Rehab, where he meets his own version of himself as a child, and then his family walk in from the shadows, and I'm thinking I can see that on a stage. Yeah. It's bound to be. You can't avoid comparing it to Bohemian Rhapsody. No, they're very different films. The points of similarity are obvious. Firstly, they were superstars around the same time. Elton's had a much longer career because he's lived a lot longer. But the peaks of their fames intersected. They both have had addiction. Well, no, I don't know if Freddie Mercury had addiction problems, but he certainly partied hard, and as has Elton. And they both had. They were both gay in eras where it wasn't necessarily the done thing, if you like, in terms of coming out and being public about it and being open about it. So you had the sort of people would come out as bisexual, like that was somehow a bit better because you're only a bit gay, which is just a bizarre logic when you think about it. But
well, I'm gay, but I still shag women. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes you'd have people almost seem to add it as like a character thing, because there were a couple of people I know came out as bisexual, famous stars, who I'm not actually sure were. I think it was almost like this is quite exotic. But so that bizarrely, that's through the twisted prism of fame, bisexuality was all right, but homosexuality wasn't.
I think what it was, you had, like, they say, the 60s and things like that, and then the free love, and you had which had a lot more experimentation. So you had like people who generally were like I think the constant rumor mills like Bowie and Jagger.
That's what I was getting at. Bowie at one point in his career said he was bisexual, and I'm not sure he would have identified that way later in his life.
So there's kind of there was like kind of acceptance of that kind of like experimentation. So
yeah.
So I think.
But whatever the point on that, Bohemian Rhapsody is a straightforward biopic. I gave it an all right review actually. But there were bits of it that just pissed me off. We've already talked earlier about, the overdoing of the importance of Live Aid. But they also rearranged the script around it, like diagnosing his HIV 2 years before it happened in real life, giving him a break from the band for a period of time that never happened, which again plays as moralising, whether you mean it or not. It's like, well, he got himself in all that trouble because we weren't around. And there was a point in the film as well where there was some party he was at and all the band are like shaking their head at him, you know? And I'm thinking, what is that if not moralising?
It's also like the stuff of like, oh, well, you know, Freddie was the one who decided to go like solo. It's like, hang on, no, you had a solo album before then.
Yeah, stuff like that. And you know, you look up when the Works came out, the world tour they went on afterwards. They were playing together weeks before Live Aid, you know. But anyway, the point is, and then Live Aid becomes this whole the world stops and the over dancing in pubs. Is that really what was happening in pubs up the country? Gnarly fucking drunk middle-aged men dancing to Queen? I doubt it. But anyway, this film is much more about establishing mood and tone through his music. So he sings, or his family sing, I Want Love in a scene that's set in the late 50s, probably, maybe early 60s, one of the two. Well, the song came out in 2001. It's got a Robert Downey Jr. video to it, which was quite meta because Robert Downey Jr. was sort of starting to recover by then from all of his problems. And, you know, Elton has a history of trying to help these people. And I really liked all of that. The transition from childhood to adulthood through Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting was joyous. And that was the first time I thought this is a stage play. You know, he's playing in a pub. He goes outside. He's dancing down the street. Suddenly it's Taron Egerton. And then he's dancing with people, which made me think of two things. It made me think of West Side Story. And it made me think of the Blues Brothers, where they were all dancing in the street while Shaker Tail Feather was playing, Ray Charles. So it moved like that. Taron Egerton plays Taron Egerton, but with Elton John's speech pattern. So he's not doing an impression. You can, Elton John talking, I mean, not singing, doesn't have a wildly distinctive voice. But if you just watch an interview with him, which I haven't done, but I can hear them in my head from over the years, that Taron Egerton is copying that speech pattern. It's slightly clipped. And singing, he's just doing an approximation. It's just like, doesn't this remind you of Elton John? And whilst story-wise, I wanted that, because I just think this fucking jukebox approach of something like Bohemian Rhapsody is actually quite distancing, because it is just like a jukebox. You're not laying the character or the actor bare on camera. You know what I mean? Whereas I think making Taron Egerton sing is making him open and vulnerable, therefore the characters such as well. The live stuff was amazing, right from the troubadour stuff, where, I mean, he was the floating stuff. I've theorized what that might be about, but Elton John has actually said that's just how it made me feel. And when it is life spinning out of control, so he's spinning on this like piano, and his suits are constantly changing, and he's playing like, they even had the sense to use Pinball Wizard, which he sang in the film version of Tommy. It's a Who song. It's a Pete, what's he called? Song. Pete Townsend song. So, but he did a fairly famous version of that, and if you go and watch the sketch, he stood on 4 foot tall Doc Martin singing it. It's brilliant. So I loved all that. The only bit of the film where I thought, oh, you're trying to settle a score there, Elton, was the way John Reid was characterised. Because they did have a romantic relationship. They actually lived together for a while. But if you look back on it, John Reid and him were in the courts in about 2001. So I felt there was a little bit of score setting then. But I'm led to believe Elton John largely stayed away from the set. David Furnish was there quite a bit. But he said it would be awkward having me there, just while you're trying to play me. But I just thought Taron Egerton was wonderful. I mean, it's a different performance from Rami Malek, and I don't have a problem with Rami Malek winning all the awards going for what he did. But this is just different because he's singing. I think I'm just drawn much more into him, much more into his feelings, his pain. It sets up very early what his childhood life was like. But again, it doesn't belabor it, because there's nothing worse than a biography. It's like when you read someone's autobiography and you get to like page 127 or something and they're still talking about what they did at school, and you feel like saying, hurry up and get famous, you arsehole. The film didn't belabor childhood too long. That was, I think, my only concern when we saw Little Elton. You know what I mean? But it was great. As a story, it's not really a story. It's just running you through. It's an infusion of peak era Elton John, bookended or wrapped inside kind of a flavour of where it ended up leading him, i.e. rehab, because no one can live at that speed forever. And it does what the film, it chooses the music that the film requires. So he was in rehab in the early 90s. I think it was 1991. And of course, Bernie Taupin hands him some lyrics and says, this needs music, and it's I'm Still Standing. And then, you know, his big comeback is the video for I'm Still Standing, which has some of the worst CG I've ever seen, because it's the video for I'm Still Standing with, like, Taron Egerton's face plastered on. It just doesn't look good at all. But I'm Still Standing is a 1983 song. So, but it was right for the film. So I really, really enjoyed it. I don't think it doesn't have a point other than this is what it was like to be Elton John. This is what it was like to experience Elton John. See, that was my theory on the whole floating and stuff like that, and the rocketing and all the little affectations they put into the live stuff. What it turns out is that, as Elton said, it's what it felt like to me. I thought it was the film trying to show a modern audience what it would feel like at the time to go and see him. It's a bit like if you watch Moulin Rouge, they put a ton more colour into, like, all the lingerie the women wore and stuff like that, just to give it a vibrancy so a modern audience could approximate how it would have felt at the time. Not shock value, but vibrancy. And I thought that's what it was trying to do, but it really wasn't. Yeah, it's just an infusion of peak era Elton John with just a flavour of what it cost him, but also the fact that he got himself out of it. But also I felt there was a lack of moralising with Bohemian Rhapsody. The film, whether it meant to say it or not, was he brought it on himself. Whereas the whole point of this film is about Elton John learning to accept himself. It's a completely different message. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really liked it. As I said, I think it had a really sort of good like explanation of like of where these things come from, and I think it did something different from what the usual biopic thing is to do. It felt like it didn't sort of go through all the songs. It kind of was selected in that manner. It also had some really sort of strong scenes, I thought, like particularly when you sort of have the relationship with the father, and he's very like, he was very sort of cold and uninterested, and when he sort of goes and sees him as an adult, and he's like moved on with a different family, and he's treating his new children. He's learned
his lessons. It isn't actually about Elton. It isn't that he loved Elton any less. It's that he's learned how to love, and show that love. That's the one bit of the film that really got me. A lot of this film, I'm not going to go into it because although I'm quite open on these things, let's just say a lot of this film talked to me on that sort of stuff. There were bits of this film, particularly about his own self-esteem and that, which just really, really fucking talked to me. But the bit I nearly went at was that, the being desperate from a hug from your dad and things like that. That really got to me. So
you really got like that, how that would feel to you, like if you saw that, and just like, and I know all he's got to say to you is like, "Oh, can you sign this for me, mate?" You know what I mean? It's like,
it's not even to me. There's not even any real pride in it. But that's what it is. And I've read Elton did an interview. Well, I say written. You would experience it written. It's not a video of him talking. I can't remember who it was from, but in just after the film, and he was talking about a lot of this stuff. And he said, "I'm sure my parents loved each other at some point." He said, "But by the time I came along, there was no sign of it, and they argued a lot. And a lot of the time, they were arguing about me, how I should be brought up and stuff like that, and it was just really, really difficult." And you see it, and if you were to boil it down in a rather reductive and slightly twee manner, to be honest, it isn't as simplistic as this. Elton John's problem seemed to stem from the fact that he just wasn't loved enough as a kid. That's what it was. So he grew up not loving himself, and that speaks to me. There's no doubt. So it's not a perfect film, but it's really good, and it's significantly. If you had to compare the two, and they're different films doing different things, but it's a much better film than Bohemian Rhapsody, in my opinion.
I'd agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So
So there's slightly apples and oranges.
Yeah, I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody's a lot more of a more of a popular led film, isn't it? It's designed to be more. It's designed more to sort of play to more mainstream audiences in a kind of weird way. It's like here's the greatest hits of Queen.
Sounding exactly as you remember them because we're just lip syncing to it.
Yeah.
So you can sing along, so it lends itself to all that. It's a very straightforward structure, so non-cinema goers would get it, i.e., as long as you recognise what a film looks like, this is accessible to you. And it's like, here's what happened. Whereas this film seems to be much more, this is how it felt. Yeah.
I think Bohemian Rhapsody felt like bigger, but this is like kind of very much smaller in nature.
Yeah. But there are points. It reminded me of when I used to when I watched The Doors. It's nothing like The Doors, but I remember before I saw The Doors, I remember the film, which led to a revival of their music for a while, as often happens with biopics. So in the early 90s, a lot of people were in school with like The Doors on tapes and stuff like that because the film had come out. But I remember, like, I'd heard of them and I'd heard some of their music, but I sort of read up a bit on them, like where were they, when were they, and all that. And I read he died at 27. And you immediately think, oh, it's some sort of overdose or accident or something. But it seemed to be like almost like wear and tear, you know what I mean? And I just remember before I saw the film thinking, how the fuck did he manage to kill himself by 27 years of age? You know what I mean? And then I watched the film and thought, how the fuck did he survive till he was 27 years of age? And I was a bit like that watching this film. I was just thinking, how is he still here? How is he still here? It was just what I loved. Another thing he said is the film has sex and drugs in it. I wanted it to be in there because that's the life I led. He said, but I didn't want it to be about that. And I think that's fair comment as well. They've achieved that. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, particularly as it was banned and edited out in Russia, that there's gay sex in it and stuff like that. That's not what the film's about. It just depicts some of that. And it's not wildly graphic anyway.
So, yeah. So, that's it. We're clocking nearly at 3 hours, Dave.
I'm so good job we cut these down in it. Very much to edit out of that either.
I suspect the next one's going to be longer. So
the next one's going to be longer because I've already, like, without even thinking, we've named almost as many films. So we shall see. We've got a few big films coming next time. So
I'm not sure when's Rambo out. Is that summer or is that
Last Blood? Sorry about the typing. You can hear that. It's 20th September. We'll have recorded it by then.
Oh, okay. So
no, that's not going to go into the summer show. We may do a Rambo series one day, though.
Yeah.
So... And then he killed some more people. And then he killed some more people.
Well, the first film, he didn't kill anyone.
The first one's great. I love First Blood. All the sequels have been... I've enjoyed the sequels, by and large. But in and of themselves, I've enjoyed them. But as sequels to First Blood, I've been pissed off by all of them. Because
it's like following Rocky with Rocky 4 every time, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. It's basically, you start off with a gritty character study, and then it's fucking, oily biceps and fucking carnage thereafter. It's just mental. It's not the same character. It's not the same film after the first one. But First Blood's brilliant. Anyone listening who hasn't seen it. 1982 film, I think.
Yeah.
First Blood. Got Brian Dennehy in it as well. A very young thingy from NYPD Blue, the ginger guy, David something.
Oh, really? Yeah. Alright.
He's got a small role in it. Brian Dennehy never ages. I'm sure if I saw him now, he looks exactly the same. Brian Dennehy's looked mid-50s forever. But yeah, there you go. So First Blood. So yeah, we won't be covering Last Blood, but we will be covering an X-Men film. We will be covering a Men in Black film. We'll be covering a quote-unquote live-action Disney remake. We'll be covering a Tarantino film. We'll be covering a Pixar film. Yeah, we've got plenty to do next time round.
Looking forward to it. So, Dave, social media.
At the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter for me.
You can find me at cinematronix.co.uk. You can find all the previous summer reviews and all our previous Do You Expect to Talk episodes on cinematronix.co.uk, where we are currently just wrapped up on Marvel. And we're doing Mission Impossible next, aren't we?
We are, yeah. We got tonight's show, which you'll be hearing hopefully around the time it's released. So the next two episodes are Casino Royale, because we always buttress our series with a Bond commentary. So the 2006 version, not the fucking Woody Allen one.
And we might do that when we run out of ideas. So
when we completely run out of Bond, yeah. We've got to do a Bond episode again. I don't know, fucking best fucking thermoses in a Bond film. I don't know.
And we will, though. You're not making any of them quicker, are we? So.
I know. Yeah, well, yeah, we've still got about, I don't know, I think we've got about 11 left to do or something, but then it'll have to be like best Bond girls or something. We'll have to keep coming up with Bond content, but there will come a point where we'll go, all right then.
Favourite Bond beauties.
All right, get that fucking Burt Bacharach score on, off we go. Yeah, so, yeah, Mission Impossible starts after that, and that should be followed by RoboCop.
So lots to look forward to, especially Mission Impossible, though.
Yeah, to be honest, Mission Impossible was probably some distance away, and then we all sort of got so excited by Endgame, it was like, no, this is happening after Marvel.
So, yeah, so there we are. So, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for Volume 2, Summer 2019.
Happy summering!